For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started.
Hello folks, this is Kent Hovind in Lenox, Alabama, and it is May the 23rd, 2017, and I have a college student on the phone who called with some questions, some things he's being taught in school. Do you care to give your name there, sir? Or at least your first name?
My name is Jackson Wheat.
Jackson, okay.
And I'm from Shreveport.
And you are in school, and are they teaching you evolution?
Yes, sir. Evolution is one of the class Evolution is a junior course. We get an introduction to it in the second semester of freshman year.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jackson, for letting me record this for our YouTube listeners, and maybe it'll help some other people. You had some very interesting, perfectly fair questions. I hate to make you do this, but would you like to start over which questions you had, and I'll be able to give my answer to them.
Okay, that's perfectly fine. So I think we both agree that natural selection happens and that it only selects from the existing genetic pool and doesn't add itself any genetic material.
Correct. Yeah, on my video number 4 of my seminar series, I talk about that. Natural selection simply selects. Suppose you decided you want to create a population of people 30 feet tall. So you're going to kill everybody. Right. You're going to kill everybody under 30 feet tall, which would be everybody, and you now have wiped out humanity. And you can't create a population of people 30 feet tall because there aren't any 30-footers to select from. However, if you wanted to create a population of people that are 7 feet tall or more, you probably could do that. Go around the world, find all the 7-footers, and everybody else, you kill them, and let those 7-footers breed. And out of their children, a large percentage may be over 7 feet, and so then you kill those under 7. You do that 3 or 4 or 5 generations in a row, and you now have a population of 7-footers. This is what farmers do with their cows or their corn or their soybeans or anything. They select a particular trait that they want, and they select it out of the population. But as you mentioned, and as I mentioned to you on our previous call, they're not creating anything. They're only selecting a slice of existing gene code. So natural selection proves creation. I think it proves that the Creator designed his creatures with the ability to produce a wide range of offspring, so some will survive in any given environment. Anyway, so go ahead.
Okay, so I like the analogy of what farmers use, so I'll go with that one. So we look at corn, for instance. Natural corn is teosint, right?
Uh-huh.
It's small. It's very hard. It's not very edible. Well, I mean, to some people it might be edible, but to me it's not.
Right.
But the farmers grew our modern commercialized corn ultimately from teosint, but they didn't grow the corn simply through natural selection alone, because there were no teosint that are like our commercialized corn. So they had to capitalize on mutations as well as natural or as artificial selection in that case to produce the modern variations of corn that we have in commercialized business.
Correct.
So for artificial selection, whether it's corn or bananas or strawberries or what have you, it's a matter of capitalizing on not just the selection process, but also the mutation.
Correct.
That add something, maybe a little bit of size, maybe a little bit of flavor, or extra kernels of corn, whatever. And so you do agree that mutations, or that there are mutations that allow us to evolve these corn or strawberries or whatever.
No, I would be cautious going down that trail. The corn, they're selecting for size. If they get a mutant that is now larger size, okay, Is that new information, or is that the same information gone haywire? There's no new. The corn didn't turn into a strawberry or banana or elephant. It is still corn. It's still recognizable as corn. So I don't think the mutation actually added anything. It accentuated something that was already existing. So I don't think that process is going to offer any hope to those who want all of humans to come from rocks over 4.6 billion years.
Okay.
Okay?
I think...
Well, let me point out one more thing, Jackson, one more thing.
Go ahead.
One more thing. This corn that they have produced, and I grew up in Illinois corn country, believe me, we were surrounded by miles of corn. The corn is A, still corn, B, it is less resistant to diseases. You have to babysit it and spray it with all kinds of stuff. And it turned loose into the wild, it would very quickly revert in a couple generations, if it survived at all. It would revert back to the native original corn. So this is not something that is going to work in nature. It might work in a farm or in a laboratory where they can babysit it and keep it alive, but it has lost its disease resistance, it's lost its resilience, it's lost its toughness. I think there's a couple of other phrases that farmers will use for plants that are able to survive, without their help. So that example, if it were true that the corn has indeed evolved or mutated and created something new, if it were true, and I'm not saying it is, that is only one of about 40 quadrillion examples you would have to come up with to turn a rock to a human over 4.6 billion years.
Okay, so I think, and it's probably my fault, but I think we are talking about two different types of mutations. I think we're on two different sort of wavelengths when we talk about this.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I agree with you completely when you say that it's built upon, that mutations are built upon the existing genetic material. I completely agree. Elephants don't, just come out of rocks magically or what have you. I agree.
Right.
But every variation, every mutation is adding to what's already there. And so when we pull those away, when we look at these mutations, over time we see a sort of family tree arising from these mutations, or from pulling them away. We see, okay, this mutation resulted in this lineage, and we see this mutation resulted in some other lineage. And so I agree, they are starting with a pre-existing material, but they are still adding information, I guess.
Well, that's where I would disagree. I don't think, this is a fairy tale that people tell. This is a story, but it's not observed in nature. We don't observe mutations add information that is useful and then succeed in passing it on to the next generations. We don't see that in nature. So it's not really science. It's more of a religion. It's something people believe in, and they believe in it very strongly. And I have to admire their faith. But it's not science. Whatever it is, science is things we can see and test and observe and study and demonstrate. So it's not science. It is a story. It's if you give it enough time, it might happen. Well, okay. We've had farmers raising cows and pigs and corn and chickens and everything else for generations, thousands of years. And all we've ever seen is chickens produce chickens and cows produce cows. And if you get a mutation that's too far from normal, it dies. The second problem you have is if you did get a beneficial mutation, like you're mentioning here, I don't think there's an example of one. But if there was one, now you got a gigantic problem of who does this one marry? You got to get two mutations, identical, in the opposite sex, at the same time, in the same place. They got to find each other and be interested.
Well, that's not really how sex works. But it's not so much about two getting the same mutation at the same time. It's about one. Mutations are very incremental, and so a mutation that isn't within a certain range of incrementalness, whatever, is going to kill the organism. which is why we have all these mutations that are lethal, because they cause too much of a negative change in this organism. But that's right. So I want to go back to this idea of information. Can you give me a definition of that word? Does that just mean genes?
Well,
It just means genes.
the English language is based upon a code of 26 letters called the 26 letters of the alphabet. If you had mutations in your writing, if you were writing down in English and every once in a while you get a mutation, a misspelling, how long would it take that process of getting mutations or typographical errors or misspellings to turn your sentence into Russian or Chinese or Korean? Well, it won't happen. It doesn't happen. It can't.
I mean, we can... I'm sorry.
Well, it's based on a different code. See, adding letters or deleting letters or transposing letters in a sentence, as an example of a mutation, is not going to add new information, especially if anything wrong or negative is eliminated right away. And there certainly seems to be a process in nature called natural selection, where anything that isn't the best or toughest or strongest is going to be naturally eliminated. It's not going to survive. If the sheep can't run as fast as the rest of the sheep, well, then the wolf is going to catch him first. So he doesn't get to pass on his genes to the next generation. I don't think that mutations are incremental. I mean, you can imagine that if you want, but that's not science. It's something people imagine happening, and they tell stories about it, and they say, well, what if, and it's not science. Whatever it is, it's a religion, I think.
Okay. So I guess we'll talk about the. You mentioned languages as you're talking about mutations. Well, we can actually see the evolution of languages. We can see the evolution from Latin to Old Castilian, which is the colloquialism of Latin, or colloquial language of Latin, to Spanish, for instance. And we can see the evolution, if you want to call it that, in such works as Don Quixote, which has elements of both Old Castilian, which is the Latin colloquial language, and Spanish.
Sure.
So
well,
we can see...
Hold on. Let me give my input on that so far, and then you can go on. That is a poor example of using the word evolution, because that didn't happen by itself. There were a lot of intelligent people over the centuries who were making those changes. People in the last 100 years have come up with thousands of brand new words. I don't know that the word computer was in any dictionary 200 years ago. I don't think the word automobile was in any dictionary 100 years ago or 150 years ago. So, yes, we are our English language is evolving, if that's what you mean, but it's happening as a result of a lot of intelligent, or sometimes not so intelligent, input. So the Latin slowly evolving or morphing into the Spanish or any of the modern Romance languages, this is not happening by itself. It's happening because of intelligent input. That is not an example of what might happen in nature to turn a frog to a prince, or to turn a rock to a prince, which is what evolution really teaches. I mean, ultimately, you have to start with a rock. 4.6 billion years ago, the Earth cooled down. It was a hard, rocky crust. It rained on the rocks for millions of years, turned them into soup, and the soup came alive, and that first life form slowly became humans. I mean, that is exactly what the story says. I've got the textbooks. I'm surrounded by a library of these textbooks that teach that. So,
I believe you.
The changes that we see from Latin to Spanish is A, not going to help for the evolution of living forms. B, it's an example of intelligent input causing this to happen. Like the automobile turning into from the Model T to the Lincoln Continental. Well, that didn't happen by itself. A whole lot of engineers designed things and made them better. So that was an example of creation and intelligence. So I'm sorry, go ahead, I interrupted.
No, that's fine. Well, I was just making the analogy with language.
Right.
That wasn't meant to be as, like this is a dead...
A proof. It's not a proof.
Example of evolution. So I was just making an analogy. As for the mutations, they are incremental. Everyone has approximately 130 mutations in their zygote alone, and the majority of these are neutral. That is, they don't express themselves, and this is understood in Kimura's neutral theory or neutral theory of mutation, I believe it's called. And so when we look at evolution over the billions of years, and we look at it in retrospect, and it seems kind of difficult to imagine that the single-celled organism eventually unconsciously gave rise to multicellular organisms, and then to fish, etc. But we have to realize, looking at that in retrospect, in every generation throughout evolutionary time, there was no conscious foresight of what any organism is going to turn into. Every organism was just going through mutation, natural selection, and speciation, and it ultimately resulted in us as well as all the other organisms.
Well, now, hold on. No. You think it ultimately did that. You don't know that. That is how the story goes, but that's not science. Nobody saw this happen. Nobody sees it happen today. It is a religious teaching that single-celled organisms became humans over slow periods of time, over billions and billions of years. That is certainly what you're being taught, and that is what you voiced here, but that is not part of science. It's part of a religion that you believe in. And it may be true, but even if it's true, it's not part of science in this case. It's an example of something that can't be observed and studied and tested. It's a story. It's a fairy tale, I think. Now, let me make 2 points here before you go on. Single-celled organisms changing to multi-celled. Are you aware of any 2 or 3 or 4 or 5-celled organisms that survive, other than a colony where each organism is doing the same thing? Are there any 2-celled organisms in the universe that you're aware of, or that anybody's aware of, or 3-celled or 4-celled? And I can answer the question by saying nobody's found one yet. I think the simplest life form that has multiple functions is about probably maybe 200 cells working together. So where are the 2-celled or the 3-celled or the 4-celled? I mean, the human body is probably 100 trillion cells working together to do the functions that we do. So to say it went from single cell to multicellular is great to say. Those words roll off the tongue easily, but it's not science.
Okay. And what's your second point?
Now, secondly, you mentioned that we have 130 mutations in our zygote. I don't know that that's true, but let's assume that it is. I think it's more than that.
Okay.
None of these mutations are helpful that anybody's aware of. And if you marry too close to your own bloodline, like your sister or mother or daughter, you're probably going to have deformed children, because now the chances of those 130 mutations lining up are much greater, which is why most states have laws, banning anything closer than second cousin marriages. I think 3 states allow first cousin marriages, but because it creates problems. So that's just, I would say that's a proof, a demonstration that the mutations that are happening are not helpful. They're harmful. And so gradually they get weeded out of the population by virtue of the fact that we don't marry our sister. Okay. That would be the dominant and recessive genes that you learn in high school biology, that gradually things can be weeded out. If there's a mistake in your genetic code, and it's a really complicated code, and the copying process is phenomenal, the way DNA replicates, it's just like mind-boggling how this could happen. But it could be like a computer code or a language or anything else, and there simply are no examples of it being beneficial, and certainly plenty of examples of it being harmful or fatal. Go ahead.
Okay. So I guess I wrote down kind of 3 things while you were talking. The first thing you said was that I just want to make sure that these are correct before I talk about them. I don't want to misrepresent what you're saying.
Okay.
You said science is direct observation and experimentation.
The definition of science needs to be agreed on before you go too far in a debate like this, but I think most dictionaries would list science from the word seer, which is the Latin, means to know. What do we know? And how do we know it? Well, we know things that we can observe, study, test, and demonstrate. That would be observational science. Now, there's another type called historical science. I know Abe Lincoln was president of the United States, even though I can't see him. So the historical science is not as credible, I guess, as observational science, but it's still credible up to a degree. But evolution is neither of those. It's not something we know. We don't know that animals turn to any other kind of animals. We know there are cows and bananas in the world today. I think that is part of science. We know that. We do not know that they had a common ancestor that was a single-celled organism, 3 billion years ago. We don't know that. We can think that if we want. We can believe that if we want. We can believe it very strongly. And we might be able to convince millions of other people to believe it. But that's not science. It's a religion in every sense of the word. So yes, I did give that definition of science, and I think if you look up any dictionary, unless they changed it in the new ones, go back and get some. I got some old ones here in the library. Okay, go ahead.
A systematic knowledge of the physical world gained through observation and experimentation. Would you say that's a fair definition?
That is typically a definition that's given, something like that. Systematic, it's the accumulation of knowledge gained by observation, experimentation, testing.
All right. Okay. Good. Okay. So would you consider inference part of the scientific method?
Yes, we can certainly infer things. Okay, but you start to lose certainty. I can tap on a block of wood and infer that it's probably solid wood all the way through. But I may, cut it in half and find out, oh no, it actually has, a hollow spot in it. Until I actually do scientific experiments, I wouldn't be able to say that my inference is the same as observational science. It may be, but we can infer what's inside the Earth by the S&P waves from earthquakes and tsunamis and things like that. How the waves travel through the crust of the Earth. I think it's a very reasonable inference and is probably true, but it doesn't rise to the level of first-class, provable, demonstrable science.
Okay. Okay. Well, let me see. Okay, so we agree on the definition of science. We agree that science is about observation, experimentation, and inference. Those are all important to understanding the world. Okay, so in that case, I'd like to say that the reason that I accept that evolution has happened it's not because I was raised in an area where evolution is exceptionally supported, I guess. I mean, I was raised in Louisiana. There are creationists in my family. I've actually got several creationist books, believe it or not. One by Lee Strobel. I've got Did Man Get Here by Evolution or by Creation? From 1969, I think it is. And so I came to my understanding of evolution because of the inferences that can be drawn from all of the observational and experiments. And so these observation experiments come from biogeography, the fossil record, phobology, geology, embryology.
Hold on. Slow down. Before you list all these, let's go take them one at a time. You're saying you came to this.
I was just making a point about those are what have pushed me to accept evolution, but we don't have to get into those.
No, I think you named them. I think we need to take them one at a time. Because
I still wanted to get to the points you mentioned earlier about multicellular organisms and human mutations.
Okay, but if you studied embryology or fossil record, etc., and those led you to the conclusion, I don't know if you've seen my video series or not, but I point out.
No, sir, I haven't.
Okay, there is no such thing as a fossil record. It doesn't exist. There are fossils, bazillions of fossils in the ground. That's not a question. But it's not a record. None of them talk. And none of them have a date. None of them have a date stamped on them. So somebody else is telling the story about what happened to form these fossils. Now, the story they're telling may be true, or may not be true. But there is no such thing as a fossil record. There are bones in the dirt, lots of them. but that doesn't mean that we can tell exactly what happened. And I point out, in a court of law, no fossils would count as evidence for evolution, because you can't prove that one had any children. When you find bones in the dirt, all you really know is it died. You don't know it had any children that lived, or it had any children at all. So in a court of law, in an honest court of law, all fossil evidence would be thrown out. Their fossil records, they would say, I object, that doesn't prove anything. Yep, I agree. And they wouldn't allow it as evidence for evolution. Embryology, they're probably teaching you in school that the baby growing inside the mother has gill slits, and they go through the pharyngeal gill arches. That was proven wrong in 1874, but they're still teaching it in schools, and sadly, it sounds like you got taught that. My video number four, which you can see on drdino.com, just watch seminar part 4, Lies in the Textbooks. And I've got a whole section in there showing about embryology, how it was made up in 1869, proven wrong in proven wrong 6 years later, 5 years later, but they still teach it. I've got biology books, let's see, right behind me here, I can grab one. They're still teaching this, even though it's been proven wrong 130 years ago. It's not true.
Well, okay, so on that, I want to say, I think you're confusing the drawing that Haeckel did, where he exaggerated the pharyngeal arches for. I actually have a biology textbook right here, Campbell 9th edition, where it's got micrograph pictures of these embryos. I mean, they didn't make up the micrograph pictures.
No, that I agree. I might have. I don't know if I have Campbell's 9th edition or not, but I'm looking around my library here. I've got Campbell's. There it is over there. I'm not sure which edition it is. Okay, it is true that many creatures, as they develop in the mother, have what would be considered folds of skin under what is going to become the head. That is true. Okay, I have folds of skin in my elbow when I bend it. Also, I cannot breathe through them.
I think that's kind of a mischaracterization of what these things are. What the textbooks aren't saying is that these are gill arches. It's saying these are homologous to the gill arches in fish. These pharyngeal gill arches in us, or pharyngeal arches, whatever you want to call them, they developed into our face, part of our neck, etc., our larynx, but they're homologous to the things that develop into gills in fish.
Right. Let me explain that. Homologous, homo means same. Homologous means this looks like it might be the same thing. Okay. Well, I would say a watermelon and a what's that game they play? Rugby. A rugby ball look very similar. They're homologous. But
no, that's not what.
Yes, it is.
Homologous means homologous is, you look at the fingernails, for instance. We have fingernails. All primates have fingernails. There are some strepsirrhines that have claws also, and they're kind of weird. But all primates have fingernails, and we all derive our fingernails, which are homologous, from a common ancestor.
No. Jackson, stop right there. Could it be we all have fingernails because we have a common designer? Why would you say a common ancestor? That is not evidence of a common ancestor. Toyotas and Chevys have bumpers. Wow, that proves they all evolved from a skateboard. No, it doesn't. It's a common design. It meets a necessary function. You have bumpers on your car. You have fingernails on your fingers, so you can do things. You can scratch things and open things. The fingernails are very handy. I'm glad I've got some. But that's not proof of a common ancestor. Whoever taught you that lied to you. It is true. It is true. We all have similar structures. Now that I would agree with. But it is not true that that's evidence for evolution. I think that's evidence of the same creator created us.
Okay, so I've got two things to say, and I'll say them, and then I guess you can address them. The first thing, your point of comparison is something that you know is created by humans versus something you know isn't created by humans. So I think that's kind of a false analogy. Secondarily, you said is it possible that it is a common creator? Well, yes, it's possible that it was a common creator. I'm not going to get into about what that creator was like or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But if we assume it was a common creator, then why did that creator create some differences in some organisms and some differences in other organisms? Why not just create all organisms the same?
Okay.
What is the reason?
Let me take the second question first. The reason I would say that the Creator made these similarities is we have similar things to do in life. We have 2 eyes, so do the apes. That's so we can get binocular vision to judge distances. A creature with 1 eye is certainly handicapped. They can't have depth perception, and it would be a hindrance. So there may be some creatures like an octopus that can survive just fine with 1 in their little world. But they're designed to fit whatever their duty is going to be in life. The differences then would be for the same reason. Let's see, you could design a Chevy pickup truck or a Chevy van. They have thousands of similarities, probably thousands of interchangeable parts, because they came from the same designer. But there are also some differences between a pickup truck and a van because they have different functions. The apes have to climb trees. I don't. Not apes, I'm sorry, monkeys. Monkeys have to climb trees to survive. I don't. So they have a prehensile tail and a grasping rear foot, which I do not have. And you don't either. You can't grab a tree branch with your feet and hang on upside down by it. So monkeys have to live they're designed to live in their world, which is mostly up in the trees, abhorral, and we are not. So the similarities could be attributed to a common designer, and the differences could be attributed to a common designer. I don't see any problem with that.
Kind of a heads I win, tails you lose situation?
Well, I think in a court of law, see, since you are asking, or the evolutionists, I should say, aren't asking nothing, they're demanding that their view be taught at taxpayer expense to all the kids. The burden of proof is on them. It's not on me. I'm not asking for my view to be taught. So it's not heads I win, tails you lose. The fact is, the similarities and differences could be a common ancestor or could be a common creator. So why are all of us paying for the common ancestor theory to be taught? A, that's not fair. B, that's not common sense. I don't think we should have public schools at all, but if we're going to have them, then certainly don't promote one person's religion over another. And the idea that we have a common ancestor because we all have fingernails, that is a religious belief. That is not scientifically observable. Monkeys are still producing babies, and they still have fingernails. And humans are still producing babies, and they still have fingernails. But we never see anything changing even closely toward the other kind. Apes produce apes, monkeys produce monkeys, gorillas produce gorillas, humans produce humans, squirrels produce squirrels. There are no exceptions. None.
Okay, so for one thing, I mean, I didn't say that common ancestry is proved because we have fingernails. I was just using that as an example. There are lots of other examples I could use.
Right.
And the point that I was making is that we have all these similarities with other apes, and we have similarities with monkeys, and we have similarities with mammals.
I agree.
And we also have similarities with reptiles and amphibians and fish, and we even have similarities with prokaryotic unicellular organisms.
Oh, sure.
And so when you look at the wealth of similarities, this hierarchy forms, and that hierarchy, just based on the morphological characteristics alone, is in the vast majority of cases shown to be true by genetics.
Okay.
We use morphology, and we also use genetics, and in a lot of cases, not in all cases, I'll grant you, but in the vast majority of cases, they give us the same picture. We share 98% of our, 97% of our DNA with chimpanzees. We also share the exact same amount of endogenous retroviruses with chimpanzees, and we both have the broken monkey gene for making citrate. It's called a gulo.
Mm-hmm.
It's broken in us, but it's not broken, and also in other apes, but not in monkeys. And so this hierarchy of genetics and morphology starts to line up, and so that's where, or at least that's partially where, the phylogenetic tree arises at. And so that's what I have to say on.
Okay, hold on 1 second here. If you don't mind, I'd like to, so my YouTubes are not much more than 30 minutes. Let me stop and start a new one. Okay, I'm Jackson. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm back. This will be part 2 of our discussion. You are a college student, in Louisiana being taught evolution, and you're giving me the examples of evolution. You said that we have 98% DNA similarity with chimps. Okay, that's where we left off. And that is simply not correct. Okay, it's about 91% similarity. But the DNA code is so complicated that even a 1,000th of 1% difference could be fatal, a change from the DNA. And again, I would point out the similar DNA probably proves a common designer, not a common ancestor. I think if you look at all the writings of Edgar Allan Poe, you would find thousands of similarities. Yes, that's this coming from the same mind, perverted and twisted as it was. It's coming from the same mind. That's why, the Telltale Heart has some similarities to his other writings. Okay, well, that's the fact that there are similarities in DNA and even maybe retroviruses, some kind of weakness in the system that allows this to happen. Could be, again, from the same designer. It is not evidence. What happens in colleges typically, Jackson, the teacher will impress the students by listing off 20 or 30 or 40 evidences for evolution. Each one, on its own, will not stand up to scrutiny. Every single one can be refuted easily. Which is why when you started naming off all the branches of science that support evolution, embryology, etc., I said, whoa, take these one at a time. No, they don't. But somebody convinced you somewhere along the line that all these similarities and all these branches of science all point to the same thing, and they don't. You're being lied to. You need to get your money back for this degree. So the phylogenetic, there's no phylogenetic tree. It's an orchard. All of the foxes, wolves, coyotes, dogs probably had a common ancestor. That would be one tree, a phylogenetic tree. All of the apples, and there are 2,000 different species of apples now, they might have had a common ancestor, and it was an apple. That does not prove apples and dogs are related. It's a completely different tree. There are 5 different varieties, or species actually, 5 species of giraffe. They might have had a common ancestor, and it was a giraffe. There are 8 kinds of bears in the world, black bear, grizzly bear, panda bear, etc. They probably had a common ancestor, and it was a bear. What we observe in nature and in reality and in science and even in the laboratory, what we observe is everything produces after the same kind. And people would recognize a grizzly bear and black bear and brown bear and panda bear as a bear. It's the same kind of animal. Now there's lots of differences, and so the Chihuahua and the Great Dane are pretty different. But they're both recognizable to a 5-year-old as being a dog. They're in the same family. I don't know that our current classification system, developed by Carolus Linnaeus, matches God's classification system of kind. It probably doesn't at all places, but I would say somewhere around the family level would probably be better than the species level. So what you're going to do in school, Jackson, they're going to show you a bunch of examples of new species, like there's now, I think, 80 or maybe 100 species of ladybugs, based on the number of spots and the position of the spots and the length of the legs. And somebody got a government grant to study all this, I'm sure. And, okay, there's still a bug. It's a ladybug. That's not evolution. It's not going to even help the evolution theory. It's the same kind of animal. There are no examples anywhere in history or anywhere in the present, or anywhere in the fossil record. There's no fossil record in the fossils. There are no examples of any animal ever producing anything other than its kind. If you want to think it happened or believe it happened, you are welcome to. But see, the evolutionist is demanding that everybody pay for his religion to be taught. And that's the way it is in America right now. All the taxpayers are forced to pay for the religion of evolution to be taught. And if you don't want to pay your property taxes that support your schools, well, then they'll come take away your house. It is absolutely forced on everybody to pay for this one religion. Okay, go ahead. Next point.
Okay, so I'm glad that kinds were brought up, because I think that was mentioned a little earlier, and I was wondering about that, and so I wrote it down, and so I'm glad we kind of came back to that.
Okay.
There was something else I wanted to say, and I forgot what it was, unfortunately. But anyways, oh, that's right. So the definition of evolution is genetic change in a population, genetic change in a population over time?
Well, hold it.
Would you agree to that?
No. This is where the problem comes in. You have to define the word evolution. Exactly what are we talking about? Because what they're going to do, Jackson, in school, there are actually 6 different meanings to the word evolution. 6 different levels or stages. If you want to write these down, this will help make it much simpler. Number 1 is cosmic evolution. Where did time, space, and matter come from? They'll say the Big Bang. Okay, what exploded? Where did it come from? And where did the energy come from? And why are there laws like the law of gravity and inertia and centrifugal force and the laws of the pendulum, etc.? Why are there any laws? Where did they come from? So cosmic evolution is a giant obstacle, I think, to those who want humans and strawberries to be related. Secondly, you have to have what's called chemical evolution. According to the Big Bang theory, the Big Bang would have produced hydrogen and maybe some helium. That's not observable, it's just a religious belief, but suppose it's true. Well, how do you change helium or hydrogen into gold, silver, and platinum?
Well, actually, that part has been observed.
No,
the
that's
process of radio astronomy. What scientists do. There was a woman in the earlier 1900s, I think it was, and they use these special telescopes, and they look at stars, and they can see that within the stars, these elements are being matched. They can see that they're matched together, and that's where Einstein's theory of relativity comes in, E equals mc squared. So a lot of energy, which is what the star is powered by, is produced when you take these hydrogen or helium atoms and you smash them together, and so it's this teeny tiny bit of mass that produces a huge amount of energy.
Correct, but see, you have a chicken and an egg. You got a chicken and an egg problem here. That's called fusion. What you're referring to. You can't fuse past iron. As far as I've never heard of anybody being able to use fusion to go past iron. And the energy input is phenomenal compared to the result. And so now you have, where did this star come from, which is the third part of evolution, stellar evolution. The stars have to form. And nobody's ever seen a star form. The current estimate, at least the last I heard, was there are 70 sextillion stars that are observable from Earth with the big telescopes. So that would mean everybody on Earth could own about 11 trillion stars to yourself. We see stars blow up occasionally. It's called a nova or a supernova. But nobody's ever seen any stars forming. And
well, actually, there was about 2 years ago, there was a quadruple star burst that was observed. I believe it was, or I remember seeing the article in, was it BBC News, but there was a quadruple star burst that was on record. That's the only one I know of, though.
So you're saying they watched a quadruple star birth?
That's what I remember the article saying. I don't remember. I have to look up the article.
Yeah, I'd like you to send me that. I'd like to look at that because I would predict they started with a big star, like Betelgeuse or something, and it broke down into 4 pieces. That is not stars forming from gas.
Here it is. I found an article. This is not the original website that I saw it, but this is okay. Yeah, I'll just send it to you. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, please do. Now, but stellar evolution, I think, is a royal problem because we've never, to my knowledge, never seen a star form. Certainly, the idea of gases condensing into a solid is counterintuitive to all known physics today. Gases, when you try to compress them, they build up pressure and they expand away from each other. It takes enormous pressure to condense gas. I mean, you got to have an air compressor or something like that. Where's this energy coming from? So, number 3, my point would be stellar evolution, I think, is a giant problem for the evolution, for the general evolution theory. I'm defining the word evolution. Number 4, you have to have organic evolution. Somewhere, somehow, non-living material, stardust, has to come alive. Now, whether it comes in a single cell or a multi-cell doesn't matter. The fact is, there's a difference between living and non-living. And this is not something dead coming to life. It's something that never was alive. All of a sudden, you go from non-life to life. That is a giant step called organic evolution, and there's no evidence of it happening. No, they can't even make it happen in the laboratory. Number 5, if you want to write this down, is macroevolution. Macroevolution is where an animal changes to a different kind of animal. Number 6 is called microevolution. This is variations within the kind. That's what you gave a definition of. That one is actually science. I believe in microevolution. I do not believe it adds up to anything other than that. Dogs may produce a big dog or a little dog, but it's always going to be a dog. So defining the word evolution the way you started to was, I started writing it down, I missed it here.
Change in the gene pool of a population from generation to generation.
Okay, now stop. Right, stop and think for a minute. That means you've already got the gene pool. Genes are incredibly complicated. You've already got this phenomenally complex, the genetic code of any organisms is more complex than probably all the computer programs written by man combined. So the genetic code in one cell of your body, just the genetic code in there, is more complicated than all the computer programs ever written in humanity. So if you want to start with that and say, now we have changes within this code, well, you're down in number 6 on my list. You're taking what's called microevolution, and that happens. Variations happen within the kind for the reasons you've stated. Mutations happen. Radiation causes things. All kinds of things can cause mutations. That's a pretty well-studied topic. But the question is, do these mutations result in some improvement, or are they detrimental? If you could find one that was an improvement, you're back to the question of, okay, who's it going to marry? How's it going to pass this on? And it's an awfully big world, so this improved version has to somehow take over the whole world to spread its genes. So if you got an improved horse, not only do you have to have 2 of them, all the other horses have to die for this to work. So what your definition that you gave is really a classic example of number 6, which I agree, it happens. Microevolution, but it's not any evidence for anything beyond that.
So microevolution is defined as genetic change below the level of species?
No, I wouldn't use the word species. I use the word kind.
I don't really know what...
Nobody's ever given a good definition of species. A dog and a wolf are different species. But they're
actually different subspecies of Canis lupus.
No, Canis domesticus, Canis lupus, Canis coyotes, they are all different species, but they can interbreed. They normally don't, but they can. A zebra and a horse are clearly different species, but they can interbreed and produce a zorse. So the fact that they can interbreed, to me, indicates they probably come from the original kind. The Bible says they will bring forth after their kind. That is, they will produce offspring after their kind. It's mentioned 20 times in Genesis 1 and Genesis 6 and 7. So I agree that animals can produce. If they can produce, they're probably the same kind. And studying exactly where the border is to define a kind would be a good endeavor for science to follow. But the fact that we don't know exactly what the kinds are in every case, I think we do in most cases, but I think that'd be a wonderful biological pursuit. However, I did not say species. A dog and a wolf are different species, yet they can interbreed. So exactly what is the definition of a species?
Okay. So I looked it up. And right now it says dogs are Canis lupus familiaris, which I thought they were.
Okay.
Familiaris is the subspecies of Canis lupus, which is what our house dogs are, and Canis lupus is the gray wolf.
Okay, well, let's take the zebra and the horse instead. Maybe that'll give a completely different species name. I forget what they are.
I mean, those are definitely different species.
Can they interbreed?
Equus, and I don't remember what the zebra is.
I don't either. It doesn't matter. But can they interbreed?
Probably not. I would imagine.
Just type in Zorse, Z-O-R-S-E.
Okay.
A horse and a zebra can interbreed. They don't normally, but they can. You can type in Pizzly, P-I-Z-L-E-Y, a Pizzly bear, a cross between a grizzly, and something else. I forget what they did.
Is it a panda?
I don't remember.
Or a polar bear?
I think it's a polar bear and a grizzly. I think. Okay. Now they're completely different species. Nobody argues about that. But they're the same kind of animal. It's a bear.
Okay. All right. So I guess if we're talking about kind, I guess I want to ask. Let's series of yes/no questions to kind of figure out what kind means. I mean, this will help. This will help me to understand what kind means.
Okay.
So, I want to ask. So, the house cat, which is Felis domesticus.
Right.
Right. You would say that is the same kind as a lion?
I would say probably they derived from the same kind. Somebody spent years crossbreeding who knows what, whether it was lions or tigers or bobcats or lynx, or there may be 20 or 30 different varieties in the cat family. And I don't know if Noah simply had 2 cats on the ark and they diversified into all of those, or maybe he had 10 pairs of cats because there are 10 varieties in the cat family. I don't know. But today we have bobcat and lynx and jaguar and, I don't know, pick a number. Say there are 15 or 20 different kinds of cats. The domestic house cat, I think, probably was domesticated from something, one of those, and probably would not, most of them would not survive in nature. So that they would be quickly selected against if it weren't for humans babysitting them.
So house cats and lions and bobcats, those are all the same kind, I guess. They're all in the...
Well, I didn't say that, but I think that's a possibility, or maybe there are 2 or 3 basic kinds of cats that they derive from. I don't know the answer to that. And again, that would be a good pursuit for some biologists to say, okay, can you get a house cat from a lion if you choose through selective breeding? I will guarantee this, you will not get a house cat from an elephant, no matter how many generations you go through. Nor will you get one from a dog. Now, the lion is maybe close enough to do that. I don't know. But
okay.
I did not...
the lion is... sorry?
I did not say they're the same kind. I said they might be. The lions and tigers can interbreed, and they get a liger or a tigon, depending which one is the male. They breed both ways.
Okay.
So you can look up ligon, Ligon. Now,
okay.
They normally are sterile, the offspring, just like a horse and a jackass produce a mule, which is nearly always sterile. I think 1 in 20,000 maybe not sterile. But then it'll quickly revert back to one or the other, depending which is the male, I think is how it goes. So the point is, even a horse and a mule or a horse and a jackass are the same kind of animal, 4-wheel drive, leather upholstery, recognizable as the horse family. This would not offer any evidence that a horse and a butterfly are related. But I would be willing I'd be willing to bet any amount of money you want that your professors believe horses and butterflies are related if you go back far enough in time.
Oh, I'm sure they are.
Okay.
I'm sure they do believe.
Sure. Well, you tell them I said, A, they're welcome to believe that, but they should stop calling it science. B, I will come to your university and debate every professor you've got there at the same time. 20 against 1, on the condition that I get half the time and we discuss one topic at a time. So I'll take on the whole faculty. I don't even know what university it is, but it doesn't matter. I'll take them on.
Okay, well, I go to LSU Baton Rouge if
Okay.
you're ever in town.
No, I'll drive over special for that. I'm only 4 hours away from Baton Rouge. I'll come over just for that. I tell you what, ask all the professors, will you debate Kent Hovind? They will say no. And then go ahead and get a room. You know, any club on campus can get a room for free. Get the chess club or the drama club or something. Say we want to rent this or get this auditorium, and have me come speak. And I'll have question answer for the whole audience. I'll take them all on.
Okay. Well, so I want to stick with the topic of kinds. I also want to say you want to avoid traffic between 3 and 5.
Okay, no problem. Baton Rouge, do they have driving tests or light at all in Louisiana? They drive like maniacs.
I mean, that's why I miss Shreveport so much, because if something 20 miles away, it takes 20 minutes to get there. In Baton Rouge, it might take you at least an hour.
Well, you need to come to Lenox, Alabama. We had a car go by yesterday. And that's about the extent of our traffic here.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm sorry?
Population 35. We love it here. Okay, so the definition of kind, I don't know that I can give you an airtight definition, I think most of them are intuitive and are obvious at first glance to a 5-year-old that a dog and a wolf and a coyote are the same kind of animal. But a 5-year-old would recognize a dog and a banana as not being the same kind. And I don't know how many varieties of bananas there are, but they are still a banana. As I mentioned, I think there are 1,000 species now of bamboo. Okay, it's still a plant.
So if we'll do the 5-year-old test, I guess. If you were to put up a picture of, a house cat, a civet, and a fox, and then a banana, wouldn't the child classify the fox, civet, and house cat as one kind?
I think they would classify the fox, the civet, and the house cat as animals, as opposed to plants. Yes, they would distinguish that, the 5-year-old test. But I think they would distinguish the cat and the civet as both in the cat family, and would say, no, the fox is not in that family. It's not the same kind of animal. It's an animal, but it's not the same kind of animal. I would guess. We got a 5-year-old running around the yard here. I can go grab him if you'd like, and I'll give him the test.
You don't have to do that.
Okay.
Thank you. So civets and the house cat are both in the order Feliformes. Cats are on essentially one family tree with the Panthera and the Felids and hyenas and Felis and hyenas. And the civets are on another tree that is closely related with genets and linsangs and all these other more odd, cat-like animals that we don't really see a lot or talk about much. And so you wouldn't say, or I don't know, this is what I'm asking. So would you say that those are all cat kind or not? Or would you say that there's not good reason to say that they're not all one kind?
That's a good question, and as I've said a couple times, that would be a good biological pursuit to determine exactly where is the border for kind. Certainly, species is a real blurry word, and
depending on which definition, I guess.
Well, if they go by reproductive, population, or reproductive possibility, a dog and a wolf and a coyote can all interbreed. A coyote and a wolf can. They don't normally, but they can. A Great Dane and a Chihuahua can interbreed. Whether they produce fertile offspring is another. You could decide to make that part of your definition. I don't know. The horse and the ass can produce offspring, but it's normally not fertile. The mule is, I think it's 1 out of 20,000 is fertile, but it's normally not. Now, you brought up a flower earlier before I asked you, hey, can we record this conversation?
Oh, yes.
Let's talk about that and tell me what you thought that proved. I've got a picture of it on my screen here for everybody to see.
Okay, so I was just pointing out, I wasn't saying necessarily that this flower proves evolution or anything as far-reaching as that. I was just making a point about mutations, that there are mutations that can increase the viability of organisms. It can help them. There are mutations that I guess you might call beneficial that will help them survive and reproduce and pass on these traits to offspring. And so with the slender clarkia, which was the flower I mentioned earlier.
Okay, let me repeat that for people to look it up. Slender clarkia, like the name Clark. Slender clarkia flower, correct. There's probably hundreds of varieties of that, but I've got a picture of one on the screen.
Is it like purple and pink?
Yeah, the outer is pink, and there's kind of a purple heart in the middle, or a real dark pink in the middle. Now,
sorry?
I could go back to Google and pull up 50 pictures, but anybody can do that. Slender clarkia is a flower that produces a variety of colors, generally around the pink or purple color band, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So there was a slender clarkia that went through one species, I suppose, that went through a genome duplication, and in that duplicated genome, there was a mutation that allowed it to have a larger range of colors in its petals, so that it attracted a larger range of insects because they could see. They were more likely to see the colors of the flower. And I was just making a point about that, showing that there are mutations that benefit organisms in nature, rather than just organisms that are, cultivated by human farmers.
Right. Let me summarize the argument here. Certainly, there are flowers that produce a wide range of colors, and some may attract more insects because of their either more vibrant colors, or we're not sure how insects actually see these flowers. Do they get what exactly is attracting them? But okay, so if there's a slender clarkia that is now more vibrant colors or a deeper shade of purple or something, and more insects are attracted that were not previously attracted. So therefore, it has a greater chance of reproducing because the insects carry the pollen to the next plant. I agree. That's probably a good observation. I would point out that it is still a flower. It was always a flower. It didn't turn into anything else. And I don't know that the offspring, this brighter colored flower, is indeed more likely to survive in nature. Did that bring along with it any deleterious things? Is it now more disease prone? Or is there some enemy going to see it now that's going to wipe that out of the gene code because it's more visible? Just like albino animals don't normally survive long because the predators can see them too easily. They lose their camouflage. So I don't know if this flower lost some of its camouflage ability for certain predators that would wipe it out. So if it's true that it happened, and it certainly could be a good story, that maybe this would give it greater opportunity to reproduce. But there may be something we haven't seen yet, as far as something, as I mentioned, deleterious, like losing its camouflage or less disease, more disease prone. That would have to be proven in a laboratory, and that would take, that'd be a good field for biology. But it's still a flower. That's not going to turn a single-celled organism to a human over any amount of time.
Okay, I agree. I mean, that wasn't the point of me saying that. I was just pointing out that I just want to get us on the same page because I know that there are some people who think that there are no such thing as beneficial mutations anywhere. And I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page in that regard.
Let me give you a qualified yes. I think if you're calling that beneficial mutation, it may be beneficial in a certain environment and not beneficial in other environments. Like the people in Africa that get sickle cell anemia are less likely to get malaria. So they would call that a beneficial mutation. Well, sickle cell anemia is not good. That is, that's like saying if you cut off your arms, you can't be handcuffed. Ha ha. Well, yeah, but, okay, I still need my arms, Okay.
Right. And in regards to that, I can come up. I know of a better example of human mutations that are definitely beneficial. It's much better than cutting off your arms so you can't be handcuffed. For example, the LRP5 mutation, which causes increased bone density in this family, and I think it's the American Southwest or the Midwest, one of those, doesn't really matter. But so this family has a mutation in their LRP5, and this mutation has been looked at by geneticists and by doctors, and they don't see any downside to it.
Yes.
This family gets the benefit of increased bone density without, something like, maybe calcium would be leached from some other source, so they would, end up dying eventually or something like that. But that doesn't happen. So what do you think of that one?
Well, that's interesting. If they have increased bone density, it's still dealing with a structure that already exists. It didn't add a bone. It didn't add a wing. It didn't add feathers. It increased the density of the bone. B, this might be an example of getting back something that was lost over the generations. Maybe everybody 5,000 years ago had increased bone density, and we've lost it for whatever reason, and this is an example of something coming back. So it's dealing with an existing code that is modifying. It's not adding new information would be the point. Secondly, I don't think we know that it's a benefit. Increased bone density would mean you're less able to swim. I would think it would harm their swimming ability. All other things considered, they're not going to float as well. So, so maybe it's a benefit for one area of life and not a benefit somewhere else. Birds have hollow bones. It would be a detriment for them to have increased bone density. They don't want that because now they can't fly as well. So, but again, that little example of a family getting a LRP5 mutation, a mutation in LRP5 gene, may indeed be helpful in some circumstances. We don't know. I think it's worthy of more study. But that is such a minor example compared to the big picture. You'd have to have trillions and trillions of these changes proven to be beneficial to change anything to a different kind of animal. Are they still human?
Are they still absolutely?
Okay, so they're still the same kind. So that would be a variation within the kind, which really would qualify, even if it qualifies at all, would be number 6. Well, it's on my list. Okay. You also talked about polyploidy, and I got a picture of that now. If you want to give your example for that.
Right. Well, again, my example with the LRP5 as well as the Flunderclarkia wasn't to show that, you know, these have become some new species of organisms. They're actually, they're observations of new species coming into existence based on the definition of the general biological species concept of species. But I was just showing that these beneficial mutations do in fact exist, and there are other ones. There's the apolipoprotein A1 mutation in the family of Melon, and there's tetrachromatic vision in some women.
Hold on, hang on, Jackson. We're at 30 minutes again. Let me stop. We'll go to part 3, and then I've got people coming to visit me in just a few minutes, and then I got to go to a graduation tonight. So I can do one more part after this. Hang on, let me stop this. All right, this will be part 3. I'm talking to Jackson on the phone, a student at Louisiana State University, and giving examples of mutations being beneficial. And you talk about a family in Italy, so that has to do with their vision. Was this a mutation, or what was it?
Okay, so this was another one I think we might have talked about on the phone. It's called apolipoprotein A1. I think they shorten it to A1 Milan because it's in the family of Milan. Right. And what it does is it allows them to ingest more cholesterol without getting all the negative side effects that come with that. You know, for example, heart disease. And so this was just another example, which we talked about with LRP5, of beneficial mutations in humans. And so I'm just pointing out that we agree that these mutations, these beneficial mutations, do exist. And what I also want to point out was that I agree with you in saying that they are, I guess, contextually beneficial. Because if you look at, an African elephant, and elephants have 38 copies of the mutation, or 38 copies of a gene called, P38, I think it is. It's a tumor suppressor gene. Mm-hmm. So, that's great for them in Africa, where, there's a lot of sun, and they also have they have reduced hair, and, all these other things that help them survive in Africa. Well, that's great for them there, but if you were to drop a bunch of elephants in Antarctica, well, it wouldn't help them there. But that's the point. All mutations are contextually important. They're important to the organism in such and such environment, but that's how evolution works. It works on the
No, slow down. No. Jackson, that's not how evolution works. That is an example, I think, of the creator designing the creatures to survive in a variety of environments. General Motors puts a heater and an air conditioner in lots of their cars. What does that prove? Well, they're planning ahead. They don't know if it's going to a cold climate or a warm climate, so let's give them both. So if the designer gave the creatures an incredibly complex genetic code that is able to allow some of the offspring to survive in a wide range of environments, that's not evolution. That's intelligent design. That's planning ahead. That's an example of creation. Now, you said we agree that beneficial mutations exist. Let me correct the record on that. I don't know that we agree on that or not. I think the examples you've given may be beneficial in one context, but may be detrimental. Maybe that same mutation causes a problem. I don't know. I don't think it's been studied enough, but that little minor variation you talk about, like the African elephants with less hair on them, okay, that may be from a mutation, it may be from a disease, it may be, who knows, maybe something lost in the gene code. But going from lots of hair to little hair is losing, not gaining. And it might be beneficial if it's hot or something, but it may, like you said, drop them off in Antarctica, they wouldn't survive. So I'm not going to go on record as saying I agree with you that all mutations or any mutations have been proven to be beneficial. There are some that are still questionable, and the jury's still out. Some people want there to be beneficial mutations, but Jackson, you would need trillions of them for your theory to work. Trillions. And more than that. And the examples you're giving, I think, are pretty questionable, and they're still the same kind of creature. To me, you haven't given any examples of any evolution at all.
Okay, I guess I agree that, I haven't given examples of evolution because, I gave you a definition of evolution earlier, but you said that was microevolution, which you said you do agree to. You said you do agree that microevolution happens. Again, I think there's kind of a misunderstanding is that all mutations, all organisms are meant to live in their own environment. They are naturally selected. They go through mutations and speciation in their own environment. They're not selected based upon what happens on the other side of the planet. Like African elephants, for instance, they're not selected based on what happens in Antarctica. They're selected and they have mutations and they go through speciation and whatnot based on what's in their own environment. And so that's the important distinction here, is that yes, these mutations are beneficial, but they're only contextually beneficial. It's not about whether an elephant can survive in Antarctica or whether it can survive in Africa. It's about they survive in Africa because that's where they went through these processes. They went through mutations and natural selection there in Africa, and that's the important point.
Well, we don't know that story's true. I mean, that's the story they give. Could it be that they live in Africa and India, the two different types of elephants that still live, as opposed to mammoth and mastodon, which probably are in the same family? Maybe that's where they spread out from Noah's Ark, had offspring. Some of them moved north and ended up dying because it got too cold. Some of them moved south and survived. There's many ways the story could be told. It is not evidence that evolution is the only answer, the only story that matches. The fact is, there are African elephants, and they have bigger ears. And there are Asian elephants that have smaller ears. Now, whether they can interbreed or not, I don't know. But I think to a 5-year-old, that's still an elephant. It's the same kind of animal. They may have diversified to where they can no longer interbreed, but it's not evidence that that's where they evolved. These mutations caused these changes in that area because of the climate or diet or whatever. No, not at all evidence of that. It could just as easily be this is where they settled in from getting off of Noah's Ark 4,400 years ago. An elephant is incredibly complicated. To get an elephant from a single-celled organism would be a real miracle. For it to happen by chance, I think it's much more common sense to say, wow, this thing must have been designed by a really smart designer. But there are some people who don't like the idea of there being a God because they're afraid he might have some rules. Thou shalt not. And they don't want those rules, so they will deny the obvious, say there's a creator, to really avoid accountability to him. I don't know you at all, Jackson. I've never met you, but I don't know, and you don't have to answer this, but I would predict, if we dig deep enough, you really don't want there to be a creator to tell you what to do. You like this evolution theory. It gives you freedom from God.
Well, personally, whether or not God exists is beside the point. God could have, as there are many, many, many Christians who accept that evolution happens, and
hang on, Jackson. I want to object for a minute. You say there are many Christians that accept that evolution happened. I object to the word accept. That's a slanted journalism way of saying this. I would say there are many Christians who believe that evolution happened.
We can say believe. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. It's something you don't know that it happened. You've never seen a dog produce a non-dog, and neither has anybody else. You believe.
That's not what evolution requires, but
well, yeah, it is. No, just a minute now. Do you believe dogs came from something that was non-dog?
The way it works is that it's a whole bunch of incremental steps, and with every generation that produces can reproduce with each juxtaposed generation.
Correct.
So every organism is of, well, unless you're talking about plants and things get weird.
All right. Well,
but for animals, if we're talking about animals, then yes, every organism is still the same species while they're evolving, but are, passing down traits or whatever. We don't have to use the word evolution, but while they're evolving, but they are all still of the same species, and they can all still interbreed. So they are the same species while they're going, but it's only in retrospect that we can say this is where such and such new species has arisen. We can't really say that while we're watching the generations go by. It's only once we look back we can say, oh, well, hey, these dogs, or these aren't the same species of dogs as these later dogs.
So, well, that's a long way of saying, I think you said, yes, you do believe at some point back in time it was a non-dog. Something that would not be considered a dog did give rise to something.
They are ultimately descended from non-dogs, correct.
Okay, and ultimately descended from a single-celled organism. Would you say that?
That's probably true.
Okay.
But I'm not saying it with any certainty.
Good, because you shouldn't. That's a religion, and you're welcome to believe that. But it's not science, and I object to having that taught to all the kids like it is part of science. That should be in a religion class at LSU, not in a science class. They're wasting classroom time to teach that as part of science. It should be in a world religions class. Now, I'm out of time here. Let me give you mentioned polyploidy, and so I called up a picture just real quick on Google of a polyploid strawberry, which is, I think, the example that I gave you before when we talked and before we agreed to record.
Right.
Polyploid means it has double, and some even have triple, the number of chromosomes. Okay, this happens. The polyploid fruit, in the case of the strawberry, is nearly double the size, or triple the size maybe. It has twice as many chromosomes. Now, and it's much bigger. Here are the problems with polyploid. A, it is taking a phenomenally complex genetic code and doubling it. It's an exact duplicate of the original code, so no new information is added. B, the offspring of these are nearly always sterile. Seedless watermelons might be an example, or seedless strawberries, if such a thing exists. Seedless grapes. Those are things that are...
No. Polyploidy results is the reason for a lot of the food, the vegetables and fruits that we eat today.
Correct.
They're not sterile. They're used to grow more generations.
Correct. But is it beneficial for the strawberry to not have any seeds now?
Well, I mean, that's different from... Well, a strawberry with seeds is different from polyploidy in general.
Well, are there any polyploid organisms, or triploid? I'm looking at Google now. I just typed in polyploid.
Okay.
Are there any that would survive in nature without babysitting them, and that would then take over the population where all the strawberries are polyploid? And I can answer the question saying no. There are no examples of that.
I work for a mammologist, and so botany is really not my field, but I find it hard to believe that there are, but I find it hard to believe that there are no plants in nature that don't survive polyploidy without human interaction. Let's see if I'm going to Wikipedia.
I'll tell you what.
Because, like I said,
why don't you? Hang on. Let's continue this conversation on another day, and you get really prepared and get some specific examples of any animal producing a different, not a story like it might have happened over billions of years. I mean a real example. Here's where we saw it happen.
Okay.
And I'd like to see that. Yeah, I apologize. I'm out of time. It's been an hour and a half. Sorry about that. But and this is kind of impromptu. But thank you so much for doing this, And you tell your university I would love to come. You get every professor from every discipline that you think applies here, and let's all go same time. I get half the time, and we discuss one topic at a time, and we can videotape it, and I can sell copies of the tape, and they can sell copies of the tape. no royalties to anybody else. All participants in the debate have 100% rights to use it as they see fit. Because I don't want to sell a video and have to remember to send somebody 30 cents. Okay.
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 I will consider that. Okay.
Yeah, please count me in on that. And if you keep studying, when you get to the top of the mountain of truth, you could be an independent Baptist, born-again Christian like me. Hey,
all right, I will consider that.
Please do. And if you get to Lenox, Alabama, please stop and visit. We are building a Christian camp here, Dinosaur Adventureland, and we can sit and hash all these things out and get it live on the camera side by side. And you can give me all your evidence for evolution. You're invited.
And here we have it, guys. The much anticipated debate between Dr. Kent Hovind and Tony Reed. Beforehand, I want to thank both these men for agreeing to this debate. It was a blast, it was engaging, and it was definitely one to remember. Now, before we start the debate, I want to let everybody know that there were some technical difficulties for the first part of it. What happened was Tony Reed's connection wasn't working as well as it should have been, and his opening statement was barely heard and understood due to these technical difficulties. Therefore, we had Tony jump out and come back on with his phone. Because of this, his slides were not visible. What we did for this debate, and in the posting of this debate on Standing for Truth, was remove the portion where Tony Reed experienced the technical difficulties during his opening presentation. Now, when he came back on, we had him restart. So he still got his full time. We made sure that both debaters had equal time. It went smooth. It went respectful for the most part. If you want to see the full debate in its entirety with the technical difficulties that occurred at the beginning, you can go over to Modern Day Debates channel and watch that debate. But we wanted this one to be more clean and more easy for viewing purposes. Anyways, before the debate starts, here are the 3 trailers. Trailer 1, the final warning, and the teaser for the debate. Enjoy, guys.
Well, here I am.
The greatest gladiator match in the history of the world.
This Friday, the wait is over. Because it's going down. And this is your final warning.
Tell me, do you plead your will?
Dr. Kent Hovind, Tony Reed, Creation versus Evolution, which has more scientific application? You do not want to miss out on this one. The world will never be the same. There was an idea to bring together 2 men to battle it out against worldviews. Creation versus evolution, which has more scientific application. Dr. Kent Hovind takes on Tony Reed today at 8 p.m. EST on Modern Day Debate. With Standing for Truth moderating. Be there.
Hey everybody, today we are debating creation evolution, and we're starting right now. Ladies and gentlemen, thrilled to have you here for this epic debate. Thanks for your patience as we've had a couple of technical difficulties. We appreciate your patience. Oh, you guys, I'm sorry. I'm working on my doctorate, and I'm teaching 2 classes on my own now, and so it's like I'm swamped. So I just want to say, for those of you who have helped this channel, of which tons of you have, thank you so much, because to be honest, I'm oftentimes feeling overwhelmed, and so you have no idea how much I appreciate all your positive feedback and love and support. I cannot express how excited I am and how thankful I am for the speakers who have joined us tonight, who are both linked in the description, so that you can go check out their content. If you enjoy it, now you can conveniently click on their links down in the description. Also, this is the first time we've ever done a pre and post debate poll. Namely, you can vote on the topic of tonight's debate. We'll let you check that out down in the description, and want to let you know, if this is your first time here, consider hitting that subscribe button, as we are trying to build an eclectic community of Christians, atheists, Republicans, Democrats, you name it. We want you here, and we're glad you are here. So with that, we will kick it off to Standing for Truth, who helped organize this debate. He's just going to go over the format and get our speakers going for their statements. So thanks so much again, gentlemen, for being here tonight. And Standing for Truth, the floor is yours.
In this section of the debate, for only approximately 2 minutes, the 2 debaters, Tony Reed and Dr. Ken Hovind, and myself, as you know, I was moderating, was muted. All I did here was thank the debaters for their time and gave them my appreciation for not only giving us their time, but agreeing to the debate. As you will see here, the debate is a blast. You guys are going to love it. And we fixed it up here and made sure that it is a lot more clean. I also go over the format for the debate, which consists of openings that are approximately 12 minutes. The rebuttals went approximately 12 minutes each as well, followed by a discussion portion and a very, very good question and answer that I think everybody's going to like. I then handed it over to Dr. Ken Hovind to go over his opening presentation. And just about the first 30 seconds or so of his opening was muted before it came to our attention that we were muted, and James fixed it. Guys, enjoy.
All set. Thank you.
There you go. Anyway, I thought that might be a little easier for the ad hominem attacks, which are certain to follow these things. That's all they've got is ad hominem. Can't attack the message, so let's attack the messenger. Anyway, somebody wants to pick up that I'm dishonest. I'd like to see where exactly. You can read all the comments about that. So, okay. The Bible says the scorners delight in their scorning. And as I watched, probably 4 or 5 is all I had time for, Tony. I apologize. 4 or 5 of your thing. I would have to say you're a typical scorner and scoffer warned about in the Bible. And I'd like to try to win you over to Christ. I think you've got a sharp mind, and it's being used for the wrong thing. And we'll see if we can fix that. God's word has a lot to say about your type. Okay. Uniformitarianism is taught in schools, that the way things are happening now is the way they've always been happening. Is this real science? Is that true, that things happen slowly over millions of years? And what is the scientific application of uniformitarianism? It's certainly taught in the school. In geology, the doctrine suggests the Earth's geologic process has acted the same in the same manner, with essentially the same intensity in the past as they do in the present. From Encyclopedia Britannica. Really? Okay. Earth's geologic processes were the same intensity in the past and the present, and that is sufficient to account for all geologic change. I don't know about that. Berkeley University had a whole article about uniformitarianism by Charles Lyell here, that thanks to the pioneering work of William Smith, he organized rock formations into a single colossal record of Earth's history. Is this geologic column really telling Earth's history? Many geologists saw on the record a stormy epoch, one in which our planet had been convulsed repeatedly by abrupt changes. Mountains were built in catastrophic instants. Oh, okay. Giant tropical plants, for example, left their fossils in northern Europe during the Carboniferous period. Earth's history might not fit a strict biblical narrative any longer. Oh, that's what they started teaching. But these revolutions seem to be a sign that it did have a direction. And you can read all this for yourself. Catastrophism. Really, Buffon and some other guys claimed the Earth had begun as a hot ball of rock. Okay, here's a public old textbook right here on my shelf. Earth is thought to be 4.6 billion years old. It began as a hot ball of rock. Is this part of the real science that you were taught, Tony, and you would like us to teach everybody else, that the Earth began as a hot ball of rock? And what is the scientific application for this theory? To teach the kids we all came from a rock. 4.543 billion years ago, the Earth formed. Is that really part of science? And what would be the scientific application for that? The purpose of this debate is to discuss the scientific application of your religion of evolution. Okay? What is the part of this one says, in the oceans 3.5 billion years ago, scientists believe the first living organisms appeared. True or not is not the question now, but what is that part of real science? And what would the application of that be? 3.5 billion years ago, life got started. Is this part of real science, or is this something somebody chooses to believe? There is evidence that life began in the earlier part of this 1 billion year range. What on earth is the scientific application of this? This is taught in the books. What application would that possibly have? How about this timeline showing Earth, the formation of the Earth 4.56 billion years ago, slowly coming up to humans today? These timelines the textbooks are loaded with this kind of propaganda. Is this part of real science, and what is the scientific application? I mean, what good is this doing? We're wasting textbook space. I mean, I think in biology class, they ought to be teaching, biology. In earth science class, they should be teaching the science of the earth. There's a million things you can learn without referring to evolution or creation, okay? Psychology, evolution of earth and life on earth. What on earth does this have to do with psychology? Is this part of the scientific application of evolution? They show the timeline from the sun igniting and then the earth forming and everything coming. The books are full of this kind of propaganda. What is the scientific application of this? I don't understand how this applies to science. This one shows humans and insects and fish have a common ancestor. What is the scientific application of that? Is that what you want people to be taught, Tony? Anyway, the Earth's been cooling through time. They argued that the tropical plants of Europe must have lived during the warmer times. And there were sudden, violent uplifts of mountains and volcanic eruptions. Oh. So is it true that uniformitarian is the present, is the key to the past? In other words, the way things are happening now is the way they've always been happening? I don't think that's true. I think that's a lie number 6 in my video series of 75 lies in the textbook. The catastrophes can change things rapidly. For example, do you think this little creek flowing through this gash right here made that gash? Or is this quite obviously, to anybody with one eye and half the brain, a result of a dam failure? That little creek did not carve that gash. The lake was full of water. It got over the top, found a weak spot, and carved out a notch in seconds. So that gash did not carve, that little creek did not carve that gash. And this little creek at the bottom of Grand Canyon did not form this gash either. Grand Canyon's 18 miles wide, a mile deep, 277 miles long. That little creek did not carve that canyon. Now, if you wish to believe it did, that's your business, but that's not part of science. What would the scientific application be? Textbook says over millions of years, the Colorado River carved the Grand Canyon from solid rock. Really? Is this really part of science? And what would be the scientific application for this? Why would they teach this stuff in an earth science book? Not true. The Bible says in the last days there would be scoffers who would come and be walking after their own lust. There's the problem right there. They don't want that book telling them what to do is the problem. You did a program, I thought it was classic. They have loads of videos on the internet showing your scorning, condescending attitude toward God and the Bible and his laws. It just happened to freeze frame on Charlton Heston with the 10 Commandments pointing right to Tony. That was pure accidental. You love to mock those who believe God created the world and the global flood. This seems to be your modus operandi. Tony, you're a scorner and a scoffer, just as God predicted would come, and I'm going to try to help you. I'm your friend, and you don't know that yet. A wise son heareth his father's instruction, but a scorner heareth not rebuke. A scorner will not listen when somebody rebukes him. A scorner seeketh wisdom and findeth it not. A scorner loveth not one that reproveth him. You probably will hate me when this is over, but you come visit Linus Adventureland, we'll give you a tour, and I'll lead you to Jesus Christ. A scorner won't hear it. Scorner seeks wisdom, can't find it. Scorner doesn't love the one that reproves him. Smite a scorner, and the simple will beware. What I'm going to have to do tonight, after listening to a couple of your programs, is going to, not physically, but verbally, smite you and correct you on some of the dumb stuff you've been teaching, so that the simple people will say, wow, he's wrong, Hovind's right, the Bible's right. That's what I'm trying to do here, okay? The scoffers are going to say, where's the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. This is uniformitarianism. The scoffers are going to teach the way things are happening now is the way they've always been happening. Long, slow, gradual changes. The skull gradually gets longer and the eyebrows get bigger and you slowly turn from an ape to a human. This is all uniformitarianism prophesied 2,000 years ago that it was going to happen, and they're here. The Bible says they are willingly ignorant that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water. First thing they're ignorant of is the creation. Secondly, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. They're ignorant of the flood in the days of Noah. Thirdly, they're ignorant about the coming judgment, the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. So the scoffers are ignorant of the creation, the flood, and the coming judgment. This is what our ministry is all about, drdino.com. Come on down, see our place. YouTube, Kent Hovind Official. And you can give us a call, 855-BIG-DINO. I'm extension 3. I take 100 phone calls a day. Who changed the truth of God into a lie, it says in Romans, and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Tony, I'm worried. That's what you're trying to do. And you're trying to encourage other people to believe like you believe. It's bad enough that you want to believe that, but when you encourage others to believe something that's obviously turning them away from God, I think you might want to think about that. You say fossils. When you see a fossil, you think millions of years, rather than admit there was a flood in the days of Noah. The very existence of fossils. How many fossils are forming today in your state? How many animals get killed today, and how many fossilize? Millions get killed every day, but none fossilize. Fossilization is a rare event, and yet there are trillions of fossils. We got a museum full of them here. What is the scientific application of believing mammoth is millions of years old? What is the scientific application of that, the purpose of the debate, Tony? James Hutton wrote a book in 1795, and he said the earth is millions of years old. And that started the problem. The Bible dates, if you add them up, we get my chart here. Adam was 130 when Seth was born. The Bible dates clearly add up to teach the earth is about 6,000 years old. So somebody is clearly wrong about this. So what is the scientific application of these two theories? Well, if the Bible is right and God created it, I think we should look for order in nature. I think there would be order. I think there would be symbiotic relationships, like certain animals require certain plants or other animals. Symbiotic relationship. I think the Bible best explains that. The Bible says the plants were made on day 3 and the sun was made on day 4. I think that would work. The Bible says the plants and animals were made within a few days of each other. That would have a scientific application, because animals breathe in oxygen, give off CO2. Plants breathe in CO2, give off oxygen. They reciprocate the gases. How does that work with the evolutionism religion? The Bible says there was water above the earth. You did quite a video on Walt Brown's hydroplate theory. I'd be glad to talk with you about that. I think you misrepresented what he said in several spots, and I think you completely don't understand. I'll be glad to explain that to you. Not that I can prove that it's correct, but I think it's more correct than thinking the whole earth was squeezed into a dot smaller than a period on a page. That's dumb. That's what evolution teaches. The whole universe was squeezed into that dot. The Bible says the earth is the Lord's. He founded it upon the seas, established it upon, that's what the Bible says. He laid up the depth in storehouses. The earth was above the water. So the Bible clearly teaches there was water in the crust of the earth. That water came shooting out, and that's where the flood water came from. There is enough water on the planet right now to cover the entire earth 8,000 feet deep. If you smoothed it out, these oceans would come up and cover everything 8,000 feet deep. Where did all this water come from, Tony? Was it all squeezed into that dot smaller than a period on a page? Do you think evolution theory is more scientific to say everything came from an explosion of nothing? And you want that to be taught as science? The Bible says in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 14th day of the month, anyway, all the fountains of the deep broke. I'm out of time. Anyway, I think the creation story is much more scientific. God made it. It was destroyed by a flood. That explains all the fault lines we see. It explains everything that I can say. I don't know of anything that cannot be explained by the simple young earth creation story. And if you got something you'd like me to elaborate on, I'd be honored to do so. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that opening statement there, Dr. Hovind. I just want to let the audience know that we've seen the comments in the chat. It looks like the first couple minutes introduction by James and myself were muted, and James assured us that that'll be fixed by the end. So no worries, guys. We're going to jump right into Tony Reed and his opening statement. You can go ahead whenever you're ready, Tony.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Tony Reed. I write, produce, and I host a show called How Creationism Taught Me Real Science. Oops, hold on a second. My apologies here. Technical issues. Anyway, in my show, I start with the creationist arguments, and then I test them against the actual published science. Usually, the creationist arguments are found to be lacking, but every once in a while, the creationist argument is right, but for the wrong reasons. I also play the voice of God in Prophet of Zod's cartoon series, an extremely well-written show I'm proud you let me be a part of. I'd also like...
Now, right here is where Tony Reed is supposed to give his opening statement. Now, right off the bat, he starts experiencing technical difficulties. His connection is low, unfortunately, which is fine. But what we did here was remove this section for a cleaner viewing. Now, what we did, as I explained in the beginning, was had him come back on through his phone, and everything went perfectly. The very beginning, there's some slight glitches, but after that, the whole debate goes smooth, no issues. He gets his whole opening presentation, we have him restart. Therefore, if you do want to see the 5 or 10 minutes of technical difficulties, if you feel that something was taken out, you can go over to the Modern Day Debate channel and watch the full debate with the section here that we removed with technical difficulties. Anyways, continue on and enjoy.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
All right, well, this is frustrating, but okay. So I don't know where I left off.
I have to be honest, it's the last like 5 or 6 minutes were really hard to hear, and I was kind of hanging in there because I was hoping it might clear up. Given that we do have a little extra time tonight, I think we'll probably be okay with if you want to backtrack and maybe start at near the beginning of your PowerPoint. That would probably be about where we lost you.
Give him all the time he wants. We're fine here.
Thank you.
Start over, Tony.
We'll let you, just to be safe, we'll let you start over, Tony. I think that's a good idea. Thanks for allowing that.
You guys are quite gracious here. All right, so the topic of the debate today is whether evolution or creationism has more scientific application. In past debates and presentations, Mr. Hovind claimed that evolution is a religion. When challenged at creation events and worldwide floods,
I just want to stop Tony there and make sure, because we can hear an echo. It could be because you have the video on in the background too. That shut off.
I don't have the video on in the background.
It's definitely better now, though, for some reason. Maybe it's a coincidence.
Okay, but I don't have the video on the background, so I don't know where the echo is coming from.
Now it's actually better, though. The echo is gone. So
right,
what?
I have no idea what happened there. Okay, so for the purpose of this debate, I'm just going to work on the assumption that evolution is 100% wrong, creationism is 100% correct. I'm not even going to try to get anyone to stop believing in creationism. What I am going to do is demonstrate that even if creationism is 100% correct, it is still scientifically useless. And even if evolution is 100% wrong, it still has scientific applications that we all take advantage of. Because of the debate, I'm going to be treating both views, yes, even creationism, or a theory. We're not claiming that any theory is ever proven. We're also not discussing individual phenomena that are consistent with the theory. What we're talking about is the confirmation of scientific predictions made by the theory. This is how new discoveries and real-world applications are made. Predictions, in turn, are presented in the form of a hypothesis, and very simply it goes like
I think we're losing
observation C is to observation C, and then whether you...
I think, Tony, I'm so sorry. This argument that you're laying out right now is, I know that you said, I think, premise or operation C, but we've been like not able to hear you. It's been kind of drifting out for the last 20 seconds. I think we lost Tony. I still see his picture on the Zoom window. But
okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So again, like I said, discoveries New real world applications are made by predictions. Predictions, in turn, are presented in the form of hypotheses. Very simply, it goes like this. If theory A is true, we should expect to see phenomenon B when we conduct experiment or observation C. The next obvious step is to conduct experiment or observation C, determine whether you see phenomenon B as theory A predicted. Now, having seen Mr. Hovind debate numerous times, he's historically presented the prediction, if creationism is true, we should expect to see the fossils of dead organisms buried in the earth. Problem with this prediction is that it's being done backwards. There is no record of any creationist ever making any predictions about fossils before the first fossil was discovered. So apparently Mr. Hovind didn't get the memo on predictions. They're supposed to be made before the discovery is made. Otherwise, it's not a prediction. It's a post-diction. And it's very easy to see fossils in the ground and then only then say that you predicted it all along. But it's a completely different thing to predict something that has never been seen before and then find it. So to be fair, fossils were discovered long before evolutionary theory. The difference lies in that evolutionary theories have predicted specific fossils being found in specific strata in very specific locations before they were discovered. For example, in 1881, the lone lobe-finned fish Eusthenopteron was found in 385 million year strata. In 1932, Ichthyostega was discovered in 365 million year old strata. Now, neither of these were discovered by testing any evolutionary predictions, but using the theory of common descent, Edward B. Deschler, Neil H. Shubin, and Farish A. Jenkins Jr. were able to predict ahead of time that they should expect to find a fossil of a creature which appeared to have wrist bones similar to tetrapods, rays similar to ray-finned fishes, with spiracles in the head, which would be indicative of a lung system, in addition to what's called a pectoral girdle separating the head from the body, which makes room for a neck. They predicted that this morphological combination of tetrapod and fish-like traits would be found in Devonian strata between Ichthyostega and Eusthenopteron on Ellesmere Island, Nunavut, in northern Canada. And after 5 years of excavation, they found no less than 3 individuals matching those exact traits. And these individuals were named Tiktaalik. So whenever you see timelines of tetrapod to mammal evolution, land-dwelling mammals to whales and dolphins, horses, or even human evolution, this same assumption has told scientists where to look stratigraphically as well as geographically for those thousands of these individual fossil species showing transitional traits. That's whether or not they are actually transitional species or whether they're actual ancestors of anything. Common descent has repeatedly made and continues to make to this day these kinds of predictions. You will never see the assumption of a worldwide flood or a 6-day creation event used to find any newly discovered fossil species. Mr. Hovind has also for decades proposed that there are 6 definitions for evolution, and I'll be happy to address how each of these definitions is a misrepresentation. But for the sake of this debate, to the disgust of anyone scientifically literate, I'm going to use all 6 of Mr. Hovind's definitions for evolution, and I'll even propose that you add uniformitarianism as the 7th, since you do talk about it. Mr. Hovind has claimed that the flood model predicts that there should be strata in the Earth. And again, this prediction is backward. There is no record of any creationist ever making any predictions about strata before strata were observed. Without bothering to go over the weakness of his theory of hydrological sorting, uniformitarianism, which requires an old Earth, is used every day by geologists to predict where to find minerals like oil, coal, gas, etc. So if you drive a car, you are benefiting from the scientific application of assuming an old Earth. So to date, no geologist has ever discovered any of these minerals by assuming a worldwide flood. Now, we also discussed, if I'm not mistaken, or I did not discuss it, Mr. Hovind discussed the idea of, I believe it was symbiosis. He talked about it today, I believe. Okay, so here's the thing. As an example, he's often said, he's actually predicted that again, which of course that's after it's been discovered. He stated that plants and animals need each other because animals need oxygen to breathe, which is exhaled by plants. Plants in turn need carbon dioxide to breathe, which is exhaled by animals, something like that. The point being that neither could exist without the other. These are, okay, so the terrestrial planets, Venus, Earth, and Mars, of course there's Mercury, but it's far too close to the sun, has far too little gravity to have an atmosphere worth considering. But the other three all have atmospheres and water of some sort. Now, Venus is closer to the sun, has an atmosphere of carbon dioxide. Mars is further from the sun and has an atmosphere of carbon dioxide. Earth is in the middle of them both and has an atmosphere of both oxygen and carbon dioxide. It's the only one which we know of that also has life. If Earth were to have formed from the same accretion disk as Mars and Venus, it too would have had an atmosphere of carbon dioxide to begin with. This would mean that plants would not need animals to survive and, given enough time, would be able to fill the atmosphere with oxygen. This would predict that the earliest fossil-bearing strata in the Earth would show no signs of oxygen. We can tell if there's oxygen present in a geological period by the presence of what are called rusted iron banding. So to be more accurate, we should see diminishing to non-existent amounts of rusted iron bands as we reach deeper and deeper strata. As it happens, that is exactly what we see. The earliest life we've ever discovered is from nearly 4 billion-year-old strata, but we don't see the first rusted iron banding until nearly 500 million years later in the early to middle Archean. Incidentally, we don't see plants nor animals in the geological column until 3 billion years after that. Then, as now, the vast majority of the oxygen...
So sorry to stop you there, Tony. I think you've got about a minute. I lost track there with all the tech difficulties there, but unless you're keeping track, that would help.
This was timed for about 10 minutes. So let me just, I'll cover the other part about the Big Bang and all that if you want to discuss it. But that said, these are predictions that the assumption of evolution makes. List of predictions goes on and on. I'll be happy to address more, but my point here, like I said before, is that even if evolution were 100% wrong and creationism were 100% correct, creationism still has exactly zero practical applications, while evolutionism, if my supporters will forgive me for using the term, has endless scientific applications that we are privileged enough to be able to take for granted every day. And this is why evolution is taught as science and why creationism has no place in a science class whatsoever. There we go.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that opening there, Tony. To the debaters, we can either just do a obviously fairly moderated, open discussion, equal time, no interruptions from this point, since we had some issues there, unless you wanted to go into like a strictly timed rebuttal round. What would you guys prefer?
I'd like to address some of the points he made. Give me whatever time I take. He can take the same time.
Beautiful. That sounds good, Dr. Hovind. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Yes, Tony, you got quite a few things. I'd love to have to take a couple hours on some of these, but about the Earth having just the right amount of oxygen, et cetera, for life. You know, Venus is too much CO2 and Mercury is too hot and Mars is too cold. Does it ever occur to you that maybe that would be a prediction that the Creator designed this planet to hold life, and this is the only one that holds life that we know of? You guys spend an awful lot of money looking for life everywhere else, but nothing's ever been found for sure. So I think maybe that'd be, and the idea that predictions and backwards, I think you are completely missing the point on this one, Tony. If a police officer comes to an accident and tries to investigate and find out who did what, who hit who was where, what were the cars going, they don't sit around the police office and predict, oh, there's going to be an accident on 4th Street in 20 minutes, let's go find it. They wait till after the accident and go find it and try to figure out what happened. This is perfectly logical, common sense 101, to go find a fossil in the dirt and say, wow, what happened? And you guys put all of your emphasis on these fossils, and you're completely missing the point. No fossils count as evidence for evolution. None. You don't know those bones had any children, and you certainly don't know they had different children that lived. And if an animal did produce a different baby that was different than itself, who would that one marry? You've got a host of problems. The fact is, every farmer on the planet in the history of the world can tell you cows produce cows, dogs produce dogs. There are no exceptions. None. Now, if you want to use a fossil as evidence, that's ludicrous. In a court of law, they'd laugh you out, saying you don't know these bones had any kids. Now, you come across something like this in California. What happened here? Was this slow, gradual sinking of the highway, or is this maybe a catastrophe, like an earthquake or something? Which would have more predictive, which would have more explanatory power, a catastrophe or slow, gradual uniformitarianism? How about this? You come across this situation. Wow, did this happen slowly, or is this a result of a catastrophe? Oh, how about this? You think they laid the railroad tracks that way? Or do you think maybe this is a result of a catastrophe of some kind, the earth shifting back and forth? So which has better explanatory power, a catastrophe or gradual uniformitarianism? You're supposed to defend the idea that the evolution theory, which is uniform gradual changes, can explain things. I don't think gradual changes can explain this or this. I think this is a result of a catastrophe. I think anybody with one eye and half a brain and common sense would say, this was a disaster, something happened here. And you couldn't predict it necessarily. I mean, they try to predict earthquakes, but good luck with that one. Ask the folks that have been trying for decades. They just happen. How about lightning strikes? Can you predict that? One hit the tree outside our building here a couple of days ago. So the Bible warned us the scoffers would come, and they would walk after their lust, and they would not endure sound doctrine. I think I could look at a map of, say, San Francisco Bay. You go all the way from Redding to Bakersfield, California, and it's very low elevation, beautiful farmland in here, because it obviously was once a big lake. Which has more scientific application? Slow gradual erosion or catastrophic failure? Would it be common sense to say there might have been an earth dam across here where now San Francisco is, backing up a big lake? After who knows when, a number of years, it went over the top, washed out the dam, and drained the lake. And now we have beautiful soil at the bottom of the lake. I think that's easy to explain. I think El Paso, Texas is the same way. Why is it called El Paso? Because it's the pass through the mountains. If on each side, north and south of El Paso, there are mountains. If you were to plug that area up right across there with a dam, a big lake would fill in. I think sometime probably after Noah's flood, the lake spilled over the top and carved out El Paso in a short time. So the people say Grand Canyon, the textbook says Grand Canyon was cut by the Colorado River slowly over millions of years. That's ludicrous. That's lie number one in my series I talk about. It's just not common sense. The top of Grand Canyon is 8,000 feet above sea level. Where it starts cutting is less than 3,000 feet. Rivers don't flow uphill in Arizona or Alabama. Or I never did get to hear what state you're from or your background. I didn't get to hear that. But anyway, so James Hutton's book started this whole thing, and I'll skip some of this here, but you can watch my video series. The key is the present is not the key to the past. Catastrophes are everywhere. And I mean, evidence of catastrophes, and you can't always predict a catastrophe. You go there after it happened and say, whoa, what happened here? And they try to put the pieces together. This is detective work 101. So I think when they got to the top of Mount Everest, they found petrified clams in the closed position. Closed clams. I would look at this evidence and say, what happened here? Apparently the clam was buried alive and couldn't even open. Today, you can walk along the beach and find 1 billion seashells, but you hardly ever find a matched pair. So finding a matched pair of seashells closed and petrified, I think it would be common sense 101 to say it was buried alive before it couldn't even open. Today, a clam dies, opens, the seagulls eat it, the crabs eat it, something eats it, it's gone in minutes, and it falls apart into 2 shells. These are found 10 feet thick in North Alabama, beds of petrified closed clams 10 feet thick. Did this happen slowly by gradual uniformitarian processes, or were those clams buried in a catastrophe? The very fact that we find fossils at all is evidence of a catastrophe, because animals die all the time and they get scattered around by the coyotes and buzzards. They don't fossilize, and they certainly don't fossilize where the bones are all still articulated. You showed a picture of a guy standing on the back of a turtle working on another fossil, and the turtle's standing upright. Look at your own pictures, Tony. This had to be rapid burial with a whole lot of strata forming very quickly. This isn't slow, gradual accumulation of strata. You showed a picture of what is obviously a result of catastrophe. And the Noah's flood would explain all that. Let's see. Real-world applications. What on earth is the real-world application of digging up bones in the dirt and claiming it's the ancestor of somebody when you don't know it had any kids? The real-world application for creation is, I predict, as we dig almost any place on the planet, we're going to find strata. Why would there be limestone layers, one layer that covers nearly the whole United States? Was that slow, gradual accumulation, or would that be maybe Noah's flood? Why would there be layers of gravel? We've got gravel. This is a gravel pit we live in here. Why is gravel rounded? All over the world, you find gravel, and it's rounded. This was in a rock tumbler. This was tumbled back and forth for months during Noah's flood. Why would you say? I would predict gravel worldwide will be round. I've never been to Nepal, but I bet if we went over and got some gravel from Nepal, we'd find it's rounded too. I bet if we got gravel from South Africa, it would be rounded. I bet if we get gravel from Ecuador, it'll be rounded. I'd be willing to predict, without even going to these countries, the gravel in those countries is rounded. How's that for a prediction, Tony? I think it's because of Noah's flood was worldwide. Now, you don't want to believe in that flood, I understand, because it represents the judgment of God. No fossils count. There are 6 meanings to the word evolution. I'll be glad to debate that with you anytime. You guys try to give examples of minor changes, microevolution, and claim that somehow proves the whole theory that we all came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago. That is ludicrous. That's not common sense. Okay, how long did I take there? Slide number 101, Alt-DV.
You're at about 7.5 minutes, Dr. Hovind.
Okay, I'll give you a couple more here. Dogs, there are 339 recognized breeds of dogs. Which has more scientific application, creation or evolutionism, the title of the debate? They're still bringing forth after their kind. The Bible says they would always bring forth after their kind. Dogs produce dogs. So which has more scientific application? Are they still bringing forth? Is this still a dog and this still a dog? Is that evidence they came from an amoeba? By your theory, they came from an amoeba. So well, dog breeders will tell you there are limits to the dog variations. Can you ever get one as big as Texas or one as small as a flea? There are animals as small as a flea, like a flea. So why don't we get a dog as small as a flea? Which has more scientific application? Well, my Bible says they're going to bring forth after their kind. I think that's what we see. Your theory says humans and dogs and whales and fish and trees all had a common ancestor. Does evolution theory that everything is related to a common ancestor, does that have some kind of application to real world? The Bible says they'll bring forth after their kind 20 times in the first 7 chapters, 10 times in the first chapter. Every farmer in history knows the scientific application of believing this. It works every time. When they crossbreed their cows, they expect to get a calf, and they get one. The Bible says they'll bring forth after their kind. Now, Charlie Darwin wrote a book called The Origin of Species. All we've ever seen is what's called microevolution. They say in this Berkeley University, pesticide resistance, herbicide resistance, antibiotic resistance are examples of microevolution. It's still the same kind. It's a bacteria. Which has more scientific application? They're still bringing forth after their kind. The Bible predicted that would happen. So what exactly is the real science behind antibiotic resistance? Is this herbicide resistance enough to convince you that humans and all these creatures have a common ancestor? How about the sparrow population? Up in the north where it gets colder, the sparrows are slightly larger than they are down south. They need a bigger body to stay warm, and this is one of the evidences for evolution. Hello, it's still a sparrow. Is that microevolution? Which has more scientific application? They're still bringing forth after their kind. A 3-year-old will tell you it's a sparrow, or at least a bird. What exactly is the science you're trying to teach us here, Tony? Do you think this variations in the sparrow population is enough to convince us that humans and birds and pine trees have a common ancestor? How about the mosquito population? They've discovered now, because of global warming, Berkeley University warns us, that this mosquito has evolved in response to global warming. Really? What did it evolve? Well, it evolved, it now waits 9 more days before it goes dormant. Oh, so instead of June 1st, it goes dormant on June 10th, or whatever the date is, at 50 degrees north latitude. Hello, it is still a mosquito. They're still bringing forth after their kind, a mosquito. The fact that it waits 9 extra days to go to sleep, is that evidence enough to convince you that mosquitoes and sparrows and whales came from an amoeba? And you want that to be forced on everybody in the school system? Every kid has to learn that? It's still a mosquito, for heaven's sake. We see these charts in the books all the time. Animals and bacteria and plants all have a common ancestor. This is not science. This is propaganda. What is the scientific application for believing that animals and mosquitoes have a common ancestor? Where does this fit in? They did it. Kent Hovind taught me real science. One of your segments, Tony, you did a year ago. I'm trying to teach you, Tony, some real science, okay? They're going to bring forth after their kind. There's no real scientific evidence that any of these animals are related to each other. There's no evidence that any of these creatures on these charts even had children. There's no way to prove they had children that lived. If you want that to be your grandpa, go ahead. I don't care what you believe, but it's not science. There's no real scientific evidence that any of these living things are related. You cannot give scientific evidence that a human and a spider have a common ancestor. What would the scientific application be of believing that a human and a spider and a seaweed have common ancestor? This is ludicrous, okay? But these kind of charts are all over the books. I got hundreds of them here in my library. They're saying the humans and the jellyfish have a common ancestor. Oh, and so do all the rest of them. Tony, what is the scientific application of believing in evolution? I see no scientific evidence, there's no application for it. It's a completely useless theory. It doesn't predict anything. The flood would form all these layers, all these fossils, the rounded gravel, did it all very quickly. Your turn, Tony, let's hear it.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Hovind seems to understand the idea of an explanation. And yeah, creationism can explain a lot of things, but that doesn't give it scientific application. What gives something scientific application is that it can predict the future evidence, which means it has a real world application. And you know, the funny thing is, you stated that no fossils would ever count as evidence in a court of law because we can't prove that any of them ever were reproducing. Seems that you've forgotten about the Dover trial when fossil whales, among other lineages, were in fact accepted as evidence for evolution. This is a court of law. I wonder if you've ever thought about the oft-made claim by scientists, however, that even if we had zero fossils, we would still have overwhelming evidence for evolution. Now, this is where the prediction comes in. The idea that a spider is related to, a human or to a tree. This overwhelming evidence comes in the form of genetics. The fact that we can demonstrate genetic relationship between organisms. You may argue that this is not evidence of a common ancestor, but of a common designer. But once again, I'll point out that this was never predicted by creationists until after this homology was discovered. The reason we know about this homology, however, is because it came about by testing the prediction made ahead of time by the theory of common descent. And since scientific predictions are falsifiable, if we hadn't seen homology between species, common descent would have needed to be severely revised. Yet creationism would have been unaffected because it is unfalsifiable. Because if we did see no homology, you'd still be a creationist, wouldn't you? That's why creationism is scientifically useless. But let's go ahead and get back to the courts of law. This genetic test that we use to determine genetic relationship between species is the very same genetic test that we use to legally determine relationship between people. This not only continues to confirm the predictions of common descent every time we map the genome of a new species, but it also constitutes legal proof of common descent. Now, that said, you were talking about the Grand Canyon saying a river can't flow uphill, and I completely agree. That's absolutely true. As it turns out, the entire area of the Grand Canyon is continuously rising due to subcrustal forces at a rate of 0.6 millimeters per year. The Kaibab uplift at the canyon's base is also uplifting at various rates. These alternating uplifts have been responsible for the course changes in the river several times in the geological history. So the answer to your question is that the Colorado River never did flow uphill. The area rose around it. Now, that said, you talked about the Big Bang there. Now, with this, I didn't think you'd actually bring it up, but many people have cited that the Big Bang theory is a prediction of a creation event. I don't think you say that, but they'll even go so far as to point out that Georges Lemaitre, who popularized the theory, was himself a creationist. But contrary to popular belief, this cosmological model was first formulated in 1922 by Alexander Friedman to little attention until rediscovered in 1927 by Georges Lemaitre. The model states that at some point in the finite past, all of the matter and energy in the universe was much closer, perhaps even being condensed into a volume as small as an atom. Now, using this model in 1946, George Gamow published a paper describing how radiation could recombine and become basic atoms after a Big Bang. He theorized that in the process of recombination, microwaves would be released at a temperature of 50 Kelvin. Now, this estimate was revised several times over the following years as quantum mechanics was discovered, and I'll probably discuss that later. But in 1964, Robert H. Dick, Jim Peebles, and David Wilkinson at Princeton University were preparing to search for microwave radiation as a means of testing their own theory. And they felt that the cosmic background radiation would have been released along with matter at the Big Bang, and due to billions of years of redshift, would be at a temperature of under 5 Kelvin. It so happened that at the same time, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson were working at nearby Bell Labs experimenting on bouncing radio waves off of echo balloon satellites. And after canceling out any potential radio sources, they continued hearing a slow, low, steady, mysterious noise that persisted in their receiver. And they found that no matter where they pointed their receiver, it persisted. They discovered microwave background radiation at a temperature of 2.7 Kelvin. This confirmed the hypothesis of Dick, Peebles, and Wilkinson. In 1978, Penzias and Wilson were jointly awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics for their discovery. Now, this list of predictions goes on. I'll be happy to address that, of course. But at any rate, as far as dogs produce dogs, again, that's not even a prediction. You saw that dogs produce dogs, and you said, well, that kind of keeps with creationism. And evolution makes no other predictions about that. Evolution does not predict that dogs would produce anything other than dogs. You have been corrected on this thousands of times. Well, sorry, 187 times. My apologies. Oh. You've been corrected on this 187 times, and yet you still say this. Why do you keep misrepresenting us? This is one of your dishonesties. I don't understand why you do that. Now, the other thing, nobody debates or contests that catastrophes occur. What we contest is the idea that an entire worldwide catastrophe occurred. That's absolutely silly. We're discussing, again, predictive power. You have yet to show how any creationist has ever used the assumption of a creation event, let alone a flood event, to find anything that has never been discovered before. You're wondering what the real world application of evolution is. It's that we can make these predictions ahead of time and then discover them. Again, with the farmers, yeah, they absolutely know that they can change an organism over time. Now, maybe there are limits. We don't know what they are, but just to say there are limits, that's not even there's no quantification there. Clams. Why would we not expect to see clams buried and with their shells closed? They're diggers. They actually go under the earth. That's what they do. They dig into the earth and they keep their mouths closed most of the time. So we should expect to see that. That isn't a well, it is a prediction, but not made by evolution, but it is a prediction you can make just by looking at the real world. I wish I had the ability to show video and audio, and well, I've got audio, but pictures right now, because I do in fact have gravel in my yard that is jagged. It has jagged edges. I live out in the desert. I live near Red Rock Canyon. There is gravel there. It is not all rounded. Some of it is quite jagged. Nobody says that amoebas are the ancestor of any of any mammal or of any animal. That is, I don't know why you keep saying that. You've been corrected on that as well. Now, what you're wondering, why can't we breed a dog as big as Texas? How would a dog as big as Texas survive? That doesn't make sense at all. Where are you coming up with this? Now, the thing is, I don't know if my time is up. I don't know where, you just have this habit of going from subject to subject. People call it a gish gallop. I think it needs to be renamed the Hovind Hustle, because that is pretty insane. So at any rate, the other thing is you talked about planet Earth having the perfect amount of CO2 and oxygen. I did not say that at all. What I said was it had nothing but carbon dioxide to begin with. We can tell this because the very oldest strata we look at has no oxidation whatsoever. Only later do we see any signs of oxidation. So if you want to tell me that those areas where we don't see any oxidation are pre-flood, then you're going to have to explain why we see life there. Again, I don't know where we are. I don't know how much more time we have, but
I've got it at, so I've got Ken who went 12 minutes, and you've got another 2.5 minutes, and that would be equal time. So you can use that up if you'd like, Tony, and then we'll jump into discussion.
We gish galloped so much that I don't really have. I mean, I had to write down furiously and bring up my my evidence. Unfortunately, I can't produce the slides, so I'll just go ahead and move on to the next issue.
Okay, well, thanks for that rebuttal there, Tony. With a couple minutes left, we can just throw that into the discussion. Therefore, whichever one of the debaters would like to start, I've got the clock set here. We'll make sure there's no interruptions, and it's a smooth, free-flowing dialogue. Go ahead.
Oh, well, thank you. Tony, you mentioned I've been corrected on things quite a few times. Claiming that I'm wrong does not mean I've been corrected. I would say you've been corrected tonight. There's no evidence of any animal producing another animal ever. And your charts I showed right from the textbooks, they do teach we all came from an amoeba. Why would you say I've been corrected on that? I'm not been corrected. I was right. What do you mean corrected? About the oxygen, let's stick with just this one. They've always known the Earth has always had oxygen. Back in 1966, they said, what's the evidence for a primitive methane ammonia atmosphere? None. There's no evidence for it. This is National Academy of Sciences. How about 1976, 10 years later? There's no evidence in the sedimentary distribution of carbon, sulfur, iron, uranium of an oxygen-free atmosphere. Well, how about 1982? It was suggested from the time of the earliest dated rocks, Earth had an oxygen atmosphere. Whoa, 1992. The only trend in recent literature is far more oxygen than early claimed, okay? How about the year 2002? Earth may have had an oxygen-rich atmosphere as long as 3 billion years and possibly even earlier, from Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, the Commonwealth, okay? So you're simply mistaken. Here's 2018. Today, the atmosphere is 80% nitrogen, 20% oxygen. In the early Earth, there was very little oxygen. 3.5 billion years ago, there was only 0.001%. This is pure propaganda. They're making this up. The Earth has always had oxygen, and I know it creates a giant problem for you guys who would like life to evolve in an oxygen-free environment. I cover that very thoroughly on my video number 4. So you're simply not up to date on the literature, Tony. There is no proof that the Earth was ever without oxygen. It's not true. You need to do some more reading. I'll send you my seminar series free if you'll watch it. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, Ken, I've actually watched every one of your episodes of your seminar.
Yay. Good.
I've watched every one of them more than once. Number one, I'm challenging you to show any scientific paper that has ever said animals have ever come from an amoeba. They never have ever claimed that. I challenge you to show anybody that. Now, as far as your statement about oxygen, because you had to go to another subject, not just one, but because you do usually say one subject at a time, here's the second subject. Oxygen. You should look at your own references. This is the problem this is something I've learned from you, and in that one video you cited, I actually point out that you will cite your own references, and then the average person will not bother to look them up. I have looked up those references. Almost every one of them, you're citing the abstract, where they state that yes, it is assumed that blah 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 happened, or that it is assumed that there was oxygen in the early Earth, and then the paper itself goes on to challenge that. The other thing is, one of your papers said that there could have been oxygen on Earth as early as 3 billion years ago. That's not the beginning of the Earth. The Earth is proposed to be 4.5 billion years. It's actually, if you even paid attention to what I said, I actually stated that the middle Archean is when we first see oxygenation or any kind of oxidation in the strata, which is 3.5 5 billion years ago. So even then, that is the earliest we see oxygen in the geological column. I know you got your own statements about the geological column, but either way, it's not that I was saying that you're being corrected and that you're saying something that's true or untrue. You're saying what evolutionists, if I may use the term, are claiming. So that is what you're misrepresenting. You misrepresent what we are saying, as opposed to misrepresenting perhaps science itself. You are misrepresenting what other people say. Now, again, you still have yet to show a single prediction or any real world application of creationism. All you've shown is how we can look at something and say, oh, that happens to totally be conveniently supported by a creationist view. But oftentimes you're talking about things that were predicted ahead of time by evolution. That is all I have to say about that.
Okay, Tony, I will make a prediction right here in front of the whole world. I predict that one day you will die and stand before God and be judged. That's what the Bible says is going to happen to all of us. I predict if you don't have Jesus Christ as your Savior, you're going to go to hell. I'll make that prediction right here, right now. I don't want that for you, Tony. But you said that I'm saying it's wrong. This is the charts right out of the books. Humans, pine trees, whales, everybody came from a protista, a single-celled organism. That's what they're showing. I'm not making this up. I'm using the charts right out of the book. How about this one? All the animals, humans, everything goes back to a single-celled organism. What am I missing here? I didn't make this stuff up. Here is a, let's see, 2015 biology textbook used in Texas with a chart showing everything going back to a common ant. Does it have protista? I didn't have time to read it.
It's on the left.
On the left?
Really, really small.
Yeah, I don't have time to find it and read it here, but I'll scan it in and show it to you. The books do teach this, Tony. They do teach we came from a single-celled organism. And if you wish to believe that, that's fine. I don't care what you believe. I do resent that being taught as science, because it is not science to say we can show that humans and whales and dinosaurs and flowers came from a single-celled protista or an amoeba, whichever one you want to use, a single-celled creature. Don't accuse me of lying and misrepresenting things. I'm not misrepresenting the evolutionist position. I'm accurately showing it, and that's what bothers you, because it looks really stupid when it's shown on paper and somebody points it out. Go for it. Your turn.
Okay, first of all, your prediction that I'll die, again, that's really convenient to predict that after you've watched every person that's ever lived die. That's not a prediction. That's pretty much what we see every day. And you didn't get that from the Bible. You got that from watching people die. Second of all, here's the problem. You're saying, you're quoting single-celled animal and you're quoting protista. An amoeba is...
Wait, Tony, you left out the last half of my prediction. I predicted you're going to die and stand before God. I've never seen that. Okay, I predict it's going to happen. And I'm going to be standing there and say, Lord, I tried to warn him. I tried, Lord. Go ahead.
Hey, Kent, we agreed ahead of time not to interrupt each other. Did I interrupt you at all?
No, but you left out part of my prediction. That's all. Go ahead. Go ahead. Take all the time you want.
I'll get to that. Now, the second part is amoebas. Amoebas are not protistas. Thank you very much. And by the way, human beings are not protistas. They are not related. Okay, so yeah, do they say we came from a single-celled animal? Yeah. Do you want me to go over the cladistics of it? Because in fact, the whole idea of cladistics came about by a creationist by the name of Carolus Linnaeus. You know who he was. He was a creationist. He attempted to find the biblical kind, and everywhere he looked, he kept seeing commonalities enough that there was what he put together as a nested hierarchy, and every single creature he looked at continued to show this organism. They tended to show a nested hierarchy. Therefore, he was able to predict things like species, genus, and yet those I grant you that genus and family and class and order, those are all definitely human terms, and they are actually obsolete. But we do still put together this nested hierarchy based on his work. However, the whole reason we have the theory of, number one, evolution, but also the cladistic that we have is because he failed to be able to find the created kinds. Now, as far as your prediction about me standing before God, you don't know anything about me. You don't even know if I'm a Christian or an atheist. I've never stated anything either way. And I don't care to debate that, because this is not about that. This is about science. Now, there is no science to be gained from stating that I will die for, and I will face a judgment. What practical application does that have in the world? I will grant you that in your view, that has a practical application in another world, but that's not science. That is definitely the supernatural. I'll let that go.
Well, I think the idea that we will stand before a judge, whether it be in eternity or whether it be here on earth, I mean, does the idea that people may have to go to court, get arrested, and stand before a judge, does that affect their behavior in the real world today? Why don't people drive 200 miles an hour on the highway? There are some cars that'll do that. Certainly some motorcycles will do that. Why don't they do it? Well, they're afraid they're going to go stand before the judge one day. They don't want that to happen. So yeah, the practical application of believing there's going to be a judgment for behavior is that it modifies behavior. Hopefully. That's the goal of all the laws that man passes. So as far as the nested hierarchies, if indeed your theory is true, that everything came from a common ancestor, a protista, which is what the books teach. I've seen some that say amoeba. I'll find it and quote it for you. They say, of course, dogs always produce dogs. Well, the amoeba produced the dogs, so the amoeba produced something, or the protista produced something that was non-protista. You guys don't understand the stupidity of the own theory that you say, well, of course, dogs produce dogs. It's always going to be that way. But yet you think it came from a single-celled creature. This is hypocritical at the least, lying probably at the worst. It's simply crazy. Why can we classify animals at all? Why can anybody say that's a dog, that's a cat? Where's the 99% dog? Where's the 98% dog? Why are there nested hierarchies at all? Why can we even classify them if evolution is true?
Are you done?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. All right, so as far as, I'll go ahead and go around this. I mean, again, it's like we said, falsifiability. Essentially, if a prediction wrong, it'll prove the theory wrong. In other words, if we don't see phenomenon C when we conduct experiment or observation B, then we know theory A is wrong. This is what's called the null hypothesis. So to reference this, cite an overused example, if we found fossil bunnies in the Precambrian, common descent would be completely falsified, but we don't. If we found that all strata in the geological column were found to be deposited under marine conditions, uniformitarianism would be falsified, but we don't find that. On the other hand, if we never found any fossils, as you predicted, it would have no bearing on the validity of your belief in creationism. Now, as far as the relationship, you've used this one before, and it seems like your followers are really big on this. As far as the relationship between, let's say, elephant and pine cones, round of applause, both are eukaryotes. You already know that. You state that being a eukaryote is a feature. You said that before. It doesn't prove relationship. And you're right. It doesn't prove creation. It doesn't prove relationship at all. It also doesn't prove creationism at all. Using common descent, though, we can falsifiably predict that all plants, fungi, and animals will possess the definitive features of a eukaryote. They are all eukaryotes. Using common descent, we can falsifiably predict that all cnidarians, like jellyfish, and all bilaterians, which are noted for bilateral symmetry, like all of us here, will still retain these animalian features. So for the sake of time, I'm going to neglect the other forks in the road here, but using common descent, we can falsifiably predict that all chordates, which are defined by a notochord, will retain bilaterian features. They are still bilaterians. We can also falsifiably predict that no bilaterians will have, or no non-bilaterians will have a notochord. So using common descent, we can also falsifiably predict that all chordates, which are defined by using common descent, we can also falsifiably predict that all mammals will be chordates. We can also falsifiably predict that no non-chordates will have definitive mammal characteristics. Using common descent, we can falsifiably predict that all elephants and primates will retain mammalian features. They are all mammals. We can also falsifiably predict that no non-mammals will retain the characteristics of whales or elephants or primates. In our own interest, using common descent, we can falsifiably predict that all humans will retain the definitive features of primates. This is extremely simplified, but this prediction holds true no matter which branches you choose to take in the nested hierarchy. In fact, you can make the same kinds of predictions going from eukaryotes to plants all the way to pine trees. And you might make the argument that this is the result of a common designer as opposed to common descent. The difference again here is that if we should ever find an organism that defies this nested hierarchy, common descent would be falsified, but you'd still be proclaiming a common designer because creationism can't be falsified. It's therefore scientifically useless. And the evidence of this is that, again, Carolus Linnaeus attempted to find this, to find the biblical times and failed. But here you are using a failed attempt at a falsified prediction of creationism as an argument for common design. The irony is thick here. There we go.
Well, you keep saying they retain characteristics. Your whole thing is based on the assumption that evolution happened and animals changed. They do teach in the textbooks that single-celled creatures slowly developed into insects, fish, amphibians, birds, monkeys, and humans. This is what they're saying. They're not showing, there's no evidence of this. Nobody's ever seen a butterfly produce a non-butterfly or a butterfly come from a non-butterfly. But this creature back here that turned into both the butterfly and the human, it had to change something. It had to change a whole bunch. There's a lot of difference between a butterfly and a human. So this is what's taught. My objection is this is not part of science. There's no scientific application, even for this teaching, even if it's true. They don't retain characteristics. The fact that we can classify animals at all. You mentioned something interesting, though. Elephants and pine cones are both eukaryotes, as if that somehow proves something. You guys, R and Rod did this all the time, too. Oh, they're both eukaryotes. Yes, boys and girls, eukaryotes developed way back here. That's all that means is the cell has a nucleus which is wrapped in a membrane. I could point out that rocks and ink pens are both attracted by gravity. Whoa, that proves they're related. They actually both take up space. Oh, wow, that proves they're related. This is such a dumb argument. The fact that they're all eukaryotes, come on, get something better than that. The fact that they all have cells which have a nucleus which is wrapped in a membrane does not prove a common ancestor. It's a common building block. I bet all the bicycles and cars and trucks in the world have iron in them. That proves they all came from an explosion in a metal factory. That's the kind of logic you guys use, and you don't see it. The Bible said the scoffers would come in the last days, and they'd be willingly ignorant of the creation. Tony, you don't want there to be a creator, is my prediction. When I really get to find out about you, you're going to say, I don't want, especially the God of the Bible, to be my creator. I don't want to do what he says. That's my prediction. I don't know anything about your lifestyle, but I'd be willing to bet there's a couple things in it that would violate the commandments given in that book, and that's why you hate that book so much. Your turn, Tony.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and go back to exactly what I said at the beginning of this debate. Nobody is saying that any theory can ever be proven. A theory does never graduate to the point of fact. Now, once again, you can make an explanation. I can explain that a pink donkey came in and spat this world into existence. Doesn't mean it's true, but it definitely can explain things. What evolution does, what uniformitarianism does, what the Big Bang Theory does, what abiogenesis does, is actually predict the evidence that we find before we find it. That's what makes it scientific. Now, like I said, even from the beginning, I'll even grant you that none of this happened. But using the assumption, and I'll grant you, it is an assumption because that's how a theory is tested. You assume a theory is true, and then say, if we assume this is true, we should see this. It doesn't mean that the theory is true. It just means this theory has predictive value. You have yet to show a single prediction that has ever been confirmed by testing any theory or hypothesis that was derived from the assumption of a creation event 6,000 years ago. And I'll just keep saying that again, because that's what
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you'll keep saying it until Judgment Day. That's fine.
Hold on one second, just to make sure. Forgive me. I hate to, just to be sure that, Tony, were you done with your point?
What's that?
Well, just to be sure that you were done with your point. Okay, gotcha.
I'm done with my point.
So, Tony, if neither theory can be proven, which is what you clearly said a moment ago, then why do all of us have to pay for yours to be taught in the schools? I think a whole lot of people are sick of that. Why don't you people who believe you came from a rock 4.6 billion years ago, why don't you go start a private school and teach it without using all taxpayer money? And it's real estate taxes that pay for schools, by the way. Somebody's going to jump on the tax issue and say, Hovind and taxes. Mine was income tax, not real estate tax, and I didn't break the law then. See KentHovindinnocent.com, video number 3. But that's a different story. Real estate taxes pay for the schools. All of us are forced to pay for this one religion. This is in the textbooks. I've got hundreds of them here. I can show you. My objection is, I don't care if you believe this stuff. I care that you force everybody to pay to have your religion taught. That's the point. Evolution has no predictive power. The fact that you can find fossils in the ground could just as easily be explained by a flood. A policeman going to an accident, one guy might have a theory that this car was going this way, and they might have different theories of what happened, and they might work on those theories to try to develop reenact the crime or reenact the accident. Sure, we see fossils in the ground. We see layers of strata on top of each other. You guys are teaching the top layer is younger than the bottom layer. Oh, really? Where did it come from? Outer space? I think all these layers are the same age. They're all just, even if it's billions of years, they're all the same age. They just got reshuffled. So the idea that one layer can be younger than another is ludicrous on its face. And finding fossils in certain areas, of course, animals are sorted based upon their body density, based upon their habitat, based upon their mobility, based upon their intelligence. Clams are found at the bottom because, as far as we know, they're not too bright. And they're heavy. They got heavy shells. So I think I could predict the order of fossils based upon a flood. I'd be willing to predict the slower animals would be buried lower, or those that with more body density. Look up body density of reptile compared to body density of mammal or bird. I'd be willing to predict birds are found on top of strata generally, because birds are the last ones to drown in a flood. And when they drown, they have hollow bones, hollow feathers, they float. That'd be a prediction based on the flood model. So anyway, we're supposed to take Q&A from the audience. We've gone a long time here, almost 2 hours. But let's do another one, Tony, anytime. Take you on. We'll do another debate. Get your stuff together, okay?
Yeah, next time I'll have a better internet connection. However, if I may give you one little statement. This is not a refutation. I did a video about your legal troubles, but at no point in time did I ever ridicule you for tax evasion. In fact, what I understand, it wasn't just income tax, but also payroll tax. And I think that's the dumbest tax in the world, because why would you tax somebody for creating a job? I don't get that. That's another subject entirely. I hope you agree with me. But that said, as far as uniform, again, with all those things you're talking about, predictions, why is it taught in school? It's because when we assume uniformitarianism, we can go and predict where we'll find oil, coal, gold, diamonds. But when you use creationism to predict these things, you never find them. That's it.
Gotcha. We've
gone way over. Let's just schedule another one another time, and I'll go back and listen to some of this, and I'll try to teach him, get him converted over. And I had the first word. He gets the last word.
You got it. Thank you very much, gentlemen. So we will now jump into the Q&A. So thanks for your questions, everybody, and thanks for hanging in there. I honestly enjoyed this so much. After we got through that little part, it's like, forgive me for my tech difficulties. And we got through it. And that debate, I honestly really enjoyed listening to this. This is just a great time. It's it's like one of the better ones I've heard in such a long time. So Maynard Saves, thanks for your super chat. They said, Kent continually brings up scoffers and scorners, and this has nothing to do with the debate. He says, Matthew 7:15 says, Beware of wolves in sheep's clothing, for they are ravenous. If we are scoffers, you, sir, are a wolf in sheep's clothing. We'll give you a chance to respond from the Team Hovind side, and just want to let everybody know, I forgot to mention, if you want to do go ahead.
How on earth can you respond to that? To say somebody, there's no evidence, there's no specific charge. That's like saying you're ugly. Well, what? My hair, my eyes, my nose. I mean, that's not. Tell them to give a specific charge, okay? That's not specific. That's generic. That's slap and run, third grade stuff, okay? Tell them I said they're a coward. Sweetly.
Gotcha, okay. Thank you very much. Stupid. This is her name, by the way. This is her own title on YouTube. Stupid Horror Energy says, how does Kent explain that a large number of predictions based on uniformitarianism in astronomy, for example, have turned out to be accurate?
I would challenge that completely. I'd like to see everyone individually and give me a chance to rebut everyone individually. I don't think there have been any predictions about this uniformitarianism. All of the stuff that's can just as easily be explained by creation. If they find background radiation, for instance, what does that prove? Does that prove a Big Bang? If we see stars are moving away, which we don't see them moving, we see a red shift and assume that it means moving away, Doppler effect, and it's probably true. Well, the Bible 17 times, the Bible says these stretched out the heavens. I bet if somebody would have read those verses about God stretching out the heavens, they would probably say, wow, I bet we could predict, but they didn't know what a red shift was. They didn't know what light waves were, okay? So of course they can't predict. Someday we're going to discover light waves. Somebody could probably say someday we might discover evidence for the stars moving away because it says God stretched out the heavens. I think that could be predicted, but you can't. It's like a police going to an accident scene again, you know. Tony's all hung up on this predictive power, and so is your person asking this question. That's a ludicrous argument for evolution or against creation. Go ahead.
Standing for truth.
Can I respond to that?
Just to get through as many questions as possible, I can give you like you know what?
I'll take less than 20 seconds.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we could have looked at the Bible and predicted that we would have seen the universe expanding, but the Bible was there all the time, and people were reading it, and nobody predicted it until it was discovered.
Gotcha. Thank you. And standing for truth, just to be sure that you got the questions, the list will alternate. Sorry that I read two in a row. The floor is yours.
That's okay. So this is from username Pants L Jones. Thanks for your super chat. This question's for Tony. He asks, ribosomes read RNA and assemble proteins, including proteins that build ribosomes. Explain how ribosomes developed with Darwinian processes. Go ahead, Tony.
That's a great question. So if I don't have an explanation, it's now the ball's in your court. Show how creationism predicted it. That's it.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Next up, appreciate your patience. We've got Robert. Oh, Movie Theory. Thanks. Says thanks for your super chat. They say thanks for all you do, James. I know it's not easy, but you always fight through. I appreciate all the debates. Thanks so much. That means so much after a long day. So thrilled to have you here. And Standing for Truth, back to you.
Awesome. So this one is from Robert Summers. The question is for Kent. He says, I want to ask Kent where he is getting his argument that uniformitarianism doesn't allow for local catastrophe. Go ahead, Dr. Hovind.
Well, I never said it didn't, but they said, I gave the quotes at the beginning 2 hours ago when we started this. They're claiming that uniformitarianism, long, slow, gradual processes can explain it all. And I'm pointing out long, slow, gradual processes cannot explain it all. I've got the quotes. Let's see, slide number 28. Here we go. Uniformitarianism, the doctrine suggesting that Earth's geologic processes act in the same manner with essentially the same intensity in the past as they do in the present, and that is sufficient to account for all geologic change. Encyclopedia Britannica this afternoon, September 13th, 2019, they said uniformitarianism can explain for all the geology we see. So by this thinking, well, then that should be able to explain the crooked train track and the mudslides and earthquakes and landslides. It doesn't. There are catastrophes that rearrange things. There are continent-wide sediment layers. I think that would mean a really big flood. Tony wants it all to be local floods. The Bible said the scoffers would be willingly ignorant of the flood, and that's an example there. No, there was a global flood. There's enough water on the planet right now to cover the earth 1.5 miles deep. And if the crust of the earth is flexing up and down, and I agree, Grand Canyon, Kaibab Plateau is probably rising now 0.6 of a millimeter a year because all the dirt washed out, and now the weight's gone and it's lifting up. It's probably isostatic rebound is happening at Kaibab Plateau. But yeah, I don't think, I did quote right from the books, uniformitarianism. That is what they teach.
20-second response?
Sure.
It's funny that he says that that shows that it's all slow uniformitarian processes. They're not. No uniformitarianisms. It's not all slow. Today, quick things happen. That's part of uniformitarianism too. That's it.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Good. I know you got a response, but I just want to jump to the next one if possible. Pancel Jones, thanks for your super chat. They said, Tony, Darwinists called huge parts of the genome, quote, junk DNA, blocking scientific study of it. Studying nature as designed guides innovative engineering.
Okay, well, I know that's a statement, not a question, but in fact, I can actually quote Alan Cummings, who actually coined the term junk DNA, and he pointed out specifically that it doesn't mean useless. It just means it doesn't have an apparent function. And I will grant you that it seems like it might seem that it's useless, but I'll bet you every one of you has a junk drawer in your kitchen. I'll bet you some of you have been to a junkyard. Is all of that stuff useless, or does it have use for other things, or does it have use on rare occasions? That's what junk DNA is. And that's exactly what he said when he coined the term. In fact, he went on to name several uses for junk DNA. So the other thing is it blocked genetic research. All of the discoveries that we've made on DNA have been part of explaining or trying to figure out what junk DNA does. That's my answer.
Gotcha. Next up.
All right, quick response. I don't think there's proof that anything is junk DNA. I don't think that's possible to prove. Put a 5-year-old under the hood of your car and say, what doesn't this car need? Take out anything it doesn't need. You don't know what none of it does. He's going to take it all out of there. He doesn't know. That's all. Man looking at the DNA code of a single cell is like a 5-year-old looking at a jet engine trying to figure out what it needs. I think we have maybe way less than 1% understanding of the DNA code and the complexity of the cells of any living thing. One living cell is more complex than the space shuttle. A single cell. Average person has 100 trillion cells in their body. Some folks, many more than that. I'm trying to get rid of a couple, but that's okay. But there's no. I don't think you could prove there's any such thing as junk DNA to begin with. That's an example of our lack of knowledge. For years, they thought there was things that were not necessary. Now, they thought they had 180 vestigial organs back in 1910. They thought you didn't need your tonsils, your adenoids. It went on 180 things. Now they know the use for all of them. The books still teach the tailbone is vestigial. You don't need it. Tony, if you believe the tailbone's vestigial, I will pay to have yours removed.
Well, since you brought that up, can I respond to it?
Sure, go for it.
Vestigial has never meant useless. Vestigial simply means that the original function of the structure is no longer served. That's it.
Okay.
Gotcha. Next up, Standing for Truth, I'll let you read.
This question is from Ashley DeMarco. She asks, Dr. Hovind, why does Kent pretend to not understand evolution? Go ahead.
I think you guys are pretending that I don't understand evolution. I understand what the theory says really well, better than you like it. I understand we see thousands of changes within the same kind, like the Bible says would happen. You see big sparrows and little sparrows, depending upon the temperature. You see mosquitoes having to stay awake 9 days longer because of the latitude or temperature. I understand completely what the theory says. I've got hundreds of books in front of me here. I understand. Don't say I don't understand it. I think it's stupid. I don't think with those little minor changes that everybody calls microevolution are ever going to add up to anything that's going to change an amoeba or a protista into a whale or a human or a pine tree. You guys are the ones that don't understand your own theory. I don't think the average Mormon understands what their church really teaches till they get to the top, and then it's, oh no. I don't think, and if you understand what evolution theory teaches, that you came from a protista, and that came out of nothing. I don't think you understand how dumb that looks to the average person with half a brain. Go ahead.
Next up, we want to fly through as many super chats as we can. Sorry if Waynard Saves, thanks for your super chat. They said, Kent, have you ever seen a wolf produce a chihuahua?
I have never seen a wolf produce a wolf. I've never seen a wolf give birth to any babies, but I would assume that they did. But I think anybody would say, sure, variations happen. Wolf to Chihuahua is probably a reasonable conclusion that a wolf could gradually, or probably through selective breeding. I don't think Chihuahuas would ever be developed in the wild. Even today, you turn them loose in the woods, they wouldn't last 20 minutes. They're useless dogs. But I think that man could manipulate the gene code and turn a wolf to a Chihuahua probably over a couple hundred years. But I would be willing to bet money they're never going to be able to turn a wolf to a butterfly. I'd be willing to bet on that, or a whale, or a pine tree. Wolf and Chihuahua have very similar DNA code. There's a lot of similarities in there, and I think they had a common ancestor. And it looked like a dog, hair on the outside, nose on the front, tail on the back, four-legged. I think anybody would classify them in the dog category. So no, I've never seen a wolf give birth to anything. Not that I'm against it, but just don't get to watch that very often. Go ahead. I did raise hamsters, though. I saw that a lot.
Gotcha. Thank you. Stupid Horror Energy, thanks for your question. They asked, has Kent ever read Joseph Boxhorn's, quote, observed instances of speciation?
Wow. Never heard of the guy, never read the book. I bet there's several books I haven't read, but I read a lot. I mean, I'm willing to read, but I'm awful busy. But no, I haven't read that.
Gotcha. Standing for Truth?
Sure. Yeah, this is from Pants L. Jones. Thanks for your super chat there. Question is for Tony. Why did evolution produce aging? Go ahead.
Evolution produced aging?
Yep, I read it word for word. He said, why did evolution produce aging? That's all I got.
Aging is just a consequence of life. It has nothing to do with evolution. What evolution has done is produce organisms that happen to reproduce more successfully when they are replacing obsolete ancestors.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Let me give a response to quick one to that one.
Go ahead.
I've asked evolutionists many times. Tony, I'll ask you, why did all of these animals and plants evolve the ability to reproduce, which is pretty complicated, rather than why didn't any of them evolve the ability to live forever? That'd be a lot simpler. Why would any animal or plant want to make babies, which increases competition for itself? Hello? Why didn't they? Why did aging evolve? That's a good question, Jones. I appreciate that. Why didn't any of them evolve immortality? Fair question.
Gotcha.
Definitely is.
Gotcha.
Do you want me to answer it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Just like he argues that gravel ends up rounded, it's because the elements take their toll on you. Now, the point that he seems to be missing is that evolution does not predict that everything just automatically improves or gets perfect. What it does is say it keeps itself, or an organism will adjust to its environment to the point to where it survives more often. It has nothing to do with death. It has to do with birth.
I know you've got a response, but just to speed through these as fast as possible, we can give you a chance to respond in a bit, but just want to speed through a couple. C. Darwin, thanks for your super chat. They said, please take my money, James. Thanks. That's funny. And thanks for your support, especially on a hard day. Brian Stevens, thanks for your super chat. He said, Kent, during the last debate you did, I explained once again that a dog producing a non-dog would disprove evolution. You refuse to understand this. Let's see.
Whoa. I completely understand it. Do they think this original protista produced a non-protista?
No.
They do.
They don't.
The chart shows a protista going to a human. Somewhere along the line, it changed from the protistas are still having babies today. Why don't they make another elephant or human or pine tree? You do think protistas produce something other than their kind. Your charts show it in the books, and I got to pay for that. Don't say you don't teach that. They do teach that. That's my objection.
Go,
I'll show you the chart again. Let me get it up here.
We can.
Right. Hang on. I got it here. Right here.
Brian said, this is related. Brian Stevens said, JF explained this to you for the 1,000th time. So we'll give you a chance to bring the chart up. Oh, that was a super chat that was connected to the same one. And
was that a question for me? I didn't get it.
Oh, it was like a branch. like a branch off from that question where he said, JF, the last gentleman you debated on here, he said, JF explained this to you about the dog, non-dog thing for the 1,000th time. So
explained it to me. That's a slap and run technique. He didn't explain it to me. He made a statement. I countered it. The books do teach the protista turned into a bunch of stuff that is non-protista. What are these lines on this paper showing?
You've yet to show one that does.
What?
You've yet to show one that does.
I agree. You guys have yet to show a protista produce a non-protista. That's why your theories are religion. All these lines are religious belief. None of them are science. None of them. Nobody ever sees a protista produce a non-protista. Nobody ever sees a whale produce a non-whale. Nobody ever sees a crab produce a non-crab. But yet you got lines connecting them all like it's some kind of science, and it's absolute insanity. It's dumb. These charts are, the books are full of this stuff. Google family tree, and it'll have a protista, or an amoeba in some cases, producing all these life forms. Is a protista a dinosaur? Or did somewhere along the line the protista produced a non-protista? I'm tired, I need to go to bed. So
I predict you'll never show a textbook that shows that.
1 second. We just
I'm showing you one right out of the textbook over here on the shelf. They do teach these kind of charts are in all the books. Tony, get up to date, son. Look, Google evolution family tree, and you will see a single-celled creature becoming a human and a whale and an amoeba. Is this a whale or a human or an amoeba, or did it somehow change to something other than its kind? Don't tell me they've explained to me about dogs. I understand dogs produce dogs, and protista produce protista. So protista cannot turn into a dinosaur and a human. This is baloney. This is the kind of stuff you spread on your plants for fertilizer. Go ahead.
We have got one more super chat. Brian Stevens, thanks for your super chats tonight. He said, Kent, if you want your views to be taught in school, please use your 3 PhDs to publish and to have your work peer reviewed. Please use your 3 PhDs. We'll give you a chance to respond.
Here we go. Back to the ad hominem attack. No, that's okay. I'll skip that one. Go ahead.
Gotcha. And with that, hold on 1 second. Mississippi Wildlife, thanks for your super chat. This is related. They said, does Kent Hovind have a PhD? If so, where from?
Oh, God.
Do you want to go there, James?
Even I know that we don't want to go there.
Gotcha.
Oh, I'm not afraid to go there, but go ahead.
Gotcha.
I'm not afraid to go there. Just a silly argument.
Sure. If somebody went to school for years and got a legitimate PhD from Harvard University and came out believing they came from a protista, I would think their education's kind of stupid. Okay, go ahead. But that's okay. We won't argue that.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. And let's see. Forgive me, we had said that would be the last one. So just want to wrap up because the debaters have spent a ton of extra time here. We are indebted to them. We want to say thanks so much for being here, gentlemen. We appreciate it so much. So with that, their links are in the description. So if anybody out there enjoyed listening, we encourage you to check out their links, which are down there in the description. And also there are polls for this. This is the first debate in which we'd had polls. So down below, we have a poll for the pre-debate, which is, I think, closed now, and the post-debate poll, I think, just opened. So with that, gentlemen, one last time, thanks again so much for being here. We really appreciate you spending your time with us.
Glad to do it. Anytime.
With that, everybody, take care, and thanks Standing for Truth for arranging this debate. We really appreciate it as he connected with both, you could say, Team Reed and Team Hovind. So I want to say take care, everybody, and have a fantastic night.
Evolutionists will say that elephants, whales, pine trees, single-celled organisms, and human beings are related through common ancestry. This is the process of descent with modification. But I've always wondered, why do evolutionists very often deny what their own science fiction-based religion teaches? That at one time, the earth was ruled by single-celled organisms. And what do we have today? Whales, dogs, pine trees, human beings, and apes. I just had to investigate.
Kent, during the last debate you did, I explained once again that a dog producing a non-dog would disprove evolution. You refused to understand this. Let's see.
Whoa. I completely understand it. Do they think this original protista produced a non-protista?
No,
They do.
they don't.
Today we're going to look at evolution and the history of life on Earth. We're going to trace the evolutionary journey from the earliest single-celled organisms all the way up to modern humans, step by step. So from the beginning, life went in 3 different directions, and these are called domains. A domain is one level up from a kingdom in terms of classification. And we've got the well-known bacteria domain, but what we're mostly concerned with here is the eukaryote domain. And the word eukaryote means true cell. And what happened was a process called endosymbiosis, where various type of bacteria combined together. One cell went into another cell to create a more complex cell.
The chart shows a protista going to a human. Somewhere along the line, it changed from the protistas are still having babies today. Why don't they make another elephant or human or pine tree? You do think protistas produce something other than their kind. Your charts show it in the books, and I got to pay for that. Don't say you don't teach that. They do teach that. That's my objection.
No,
I'll show you the chart again. Let me get it up here.
We can.
Right. Hang on. I got it here. Right here.
Brian said, this is related. Brian Stevens said, JF explained this to you for the 1000th time. So we'll give you a chance to bring the chart up. Oh, that was a super chat that was connected to the same one. And
what is that a question for me? I didn't get it.
Oh, it was like a branch off from that question where he said, JF, the last gentleman you debated on here, he said, JF explained this to you about the dog, non-dog thing for the 1000th time. So
explained it to me? That's a slap and run technique. He didn't explain it to him. He made a statement. I countered it. The books do teach the protista turned into a bunch of stuff that is non-protista. What are these lines on this paper showing?
You've yet to show one that does.
What?
You've yet to show one that does.
I agree. You guys have yet to show a protista produce a non-protista. That's why your theories are religion. All these lines are religious belief. None of them are science. None of them. Nobody ever sees a protista produce a non-protista. Nobody ever sees a whale produce a non-whale. Nobody ever sees a crab produce a non-crab. But yet you got lines connecting them all like it's some kind of science, and it's absolute insanity. It's dumb. These charts the books are full of this stuff. Google family tree, and it'll have a protista, or an amoeba in some cases, producing all these life forms. Is a protista a dinosaur? Or did somewhere along the line the protista produced a non-protista? I'm tired. I need to go to bed. So
I predict you'll never show a textbook that shows that.
1 second. We just.
I'm showing you one right out of the textbook over here on the shelf. They do teach these kind of charts are in all the books. Tony, get up to date, son. Look, Google evolution family tree, and you will see a single-celled creature becoming a human and a whale and an amoeba. Is this a whale or a human or an amoeba, or did it somehow change to something other than its kind? Don't tell me they've explained to me about dogs. So protista cannot turn into a dinosaur and a human. This is baloney. This is the kind of stuff you spread on your plants for fertilizer. The chart shows a protista going to a human. Somewhere along the line, it changed.
Yes, it does, Tony. You don't know what you're talking about. They do believe that, because that is what the theory teaches. Originally, the bacteria had to swap domains and become a eukaryote, which later evolved into humans. How? Well, they tell us that these cyanobacteria evolved into multicellular organisms by either accidental mutations or some other unknown random process. I'll describe one of these dumb scenarios in a minute. But how did the eukaryotic cell itself evolve, and how did a worthless single-cell bacteria without any thought make this evolutionary leap from a single cell in the bacteria domain to a more complex cell in the eukaryote domain? They have no clue at all, just random speculation and pure imagination. One guess is that the eukaryotic cell ate a free-living bacterium that had mitochondrial, which may have ended up staying as some sort of permanent house guest, which might have changed this cyanobacteria into eukaryotic. So they believe the cyanobacteria evolved into a single lineage into an entirely different domain through a process called endosymbiosis. No actual observable, testable, or repeatable science exists whatsoever for any of this, at any level. But don't worry, they will show you lines on paper that will explain it all. And don't forget, it's a scientific fact, and true until proven otherwise. So yes, they do believe that we evolved from bacteria, an entirely different domain than eukaryotes. Exactly the opposite of what they try to tell you in debates.
Don't say you don't teach that. They do teach that. That's my objection.
No, they don't.
No matter what they try to say, they do believe that these bacteria went through endosymbiosis and moved from the bacteria domain into the eukaryote domain. Oh, and this was all supposed to have happened 3.5 to 3.8 billion years ago. And never again, not even today, no matter how much they are forced to in laboratories.
So let's start here at the bottom. The most simple type of life, a single cell, came to exist about 4 billion years ago. And we don't know exactly why or how.